to escort you. I see a few seats. I'm not sure how many we have. But it's very important for safety reasons. Otherwise, the fire marshal will close us down. That's within their purview. So, yeah. All right. I'm going to have the fire marshal. If there's anything else, you're fine. All right. The fire marshal's fine. All right. Thank you. The time for convening has arrived. We'll start this evening's series of meetings.
Mr. Mayor.
Mr. DiGiulio.
I have a parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
Will you accept a motion to adjust the agenda?
I will accept it.
I move that we adjust the agenda and take the work session off of the agenda for tonight.
All right. We have a motion by Mr. DiGiulio. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Mr. DiGiulio, seconded by Mr. Paulson, to take the work session off tonight's agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on the removal of the work session from tonight's agenda. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The work session is postponed. Moving to regular order, I'd like to call this meeting of the Sandy Springs City Council to order for Tuesday, January the 21st, 2025. Will the city clerk please make the announcements and call the roll?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. First, I would like to remind those in attendance, please silence all cell phones and other electronic devices at this time. Individuals who would like to provide public comment at a City Council meeting are required to complete and submit a public comment card in advance of the meeting. Public comment cards are available online and at the Chamber entrance. Those providing public comment may be allotted up to 3 minutes to speak on their single chosen topic. When you're called to provide public comment, please remember to state your name and address for the record. As I call roll, please confirm your attendance. Mayor Rusty Paul.
Present.
Councilmember John Paulson. Councilmember Melody Kelly.
Present.
Councilmember Melissa Mueller.
Here.
Councilmember Jody Rochelle. Councilmember Tibby DiGiulio. Councilmember Andy Bauman.
Please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. Madam Clerk, do we have any public comment cards?
Yes, we've received 2 public comment cards this evening. The first is from Barbara Schaefer, who will be followed by Bill Griffith. Ms. Schaefer.
Hi.
Hello.
I'm Barbara Schaefer, live at 8064 Kenstone Court, and I'm speaking about short-term rentals. We need to end all short-term rentals in Sandy Springs. At the last meeting held in front of the council, I felt that I did get the attention of the code enforcement staff, but nothing has happened in the last 2 weeks that leads me to believe that things will get better and change unless we can make short-term rentals illegal in Sandy Springs. There are many listings on Airbnb and VRBO in my general area, but I'm told that there are only 20 or so of these listings that have been permitted for short-term rentals at Sandy Springs at this time. So most of them are just operating illegally. Why are they being allowed? I get very emotional, sorry. How do I, an ordinary homeowner with a very small neighborhood, protest the issuance of permits and licenses for these kind of short-term rentals to happen? We're having parties, events at the house next door, all-night events, and there's very little that code enforcement and the law enforcement can do to prevent these from happening, and I think we just need to outlaw them all around. I would just like ways from the council, an idea of what we can do to prevent these from happening in the future. What can we do moving forward other than, just calling code enforcement, and it's hard for them to verify that this is what's happening next door to me in my neighborhood. And I know that it's started with maybe 1 or 2 homes, but now there are hundreds listed in Sandy Springs area on these short-term rental sites like Airbnb and VRBO and probably others. I don't really know what all the different sites are. So I guess I'm asking the council, what do we do to make it into something that can't happen in Sandy Springs anymore? And that's what I'm asking.
All right, Ms. Schaefer, can I ask you a question?
Yes.
Are you opposed to short-term rentals in toto?
Yes.
Or is it just the party houses?
All around short-term rentals. I find that anyone who's renting it short-term, less than 30 days or less than, I don't know what the term short-term would actually be. I'm not a lawyer, but I think that you don't know who's in your neighborhood. You don't feel safe, who's next door. You don't have any control over them keeping that house in good shape.
Okay. Well, I'll ask the city attorney to investigate, see what authority we may have when it comes to short-term rentals.
Mm-hmm.
My guess is that we lack authority to ban them totally.
Mm-hmm.
I think if it becomes a party house, then we have tools. But the Georgia General Assembly is pretty strong on property rights, and they don't give local governments very much authority in that area. But we'll look at it and see what authority we have, and we'll brief council on it. But thank you for bringing it to our attention.
I just want to speak to the party house, which is a whole separate thing, because we are all zoned RE1 according to zoning.
Right.
And with that kind of zoning classification, you're not allowed to have a party house.
Right.
Within a certain, and my husband and I measured, like, we're only 50 feet from the next house, so I don't know how it even happens. So.
Party houses we can deal with.
Right.
I think
Just
total short-term rentals is going to be a challenge, but we'll look into it and see what authority we have. Mr. Griffin.
Thank you.
I'm Bill Griffith. Mr. Mayor and council members, 2 weeks ago I shared an email that I sent 18 years ago to 3 of the then officials of the city. I believe the following is the only reply I received to that email. Quote, from Dave Greenspan, Bill, if you remember, the reason that radar was not an option had to do with the lack of a straight road needed to shoot the radar. I'll talk with our police chief and city manager and see what we can do, end quote. My rebuttal to Dave's email with a copy to Police Chief Wilson. Dave, I've heard several times about why radar can't be used on Roberts Drive near my house. Too hilly, too curvy, which is where so many accidents happen. It appears to me that radar can be used if, 1, the police car can be seen from 500 feet, and 2, if the grade is no greater than 7%. Both of those conditions can be satisfied in both directions on Roberts Drive near my house. P.S. Don't forget about looking into the speed brake issues, end quote. I don't have any knowledge of a reply to that rebuttal. About 2 years later, I sent another email to 3 of the then officials of the city. I'll share part of it now. Dear Councilman McGinnity, Mayor Galambos, and Police Chief Bertram, the speed on Roberts Drive is a serious issue. People have died as a result of poor enforcement of the speed limit, and more people will die for the same reason. In the past, I've sent emails regarding speeding on Roberts Drive, and for a short period after those emails, I saw increased police visibility on Roberts Drive. I actually thought the police were serious about the issue. However, such seriousness seems to have waned, and this place is dangerous. It's been almost 2 years since I brought this matter up, and since then, there have been at least 2 wrecks, which I could hear from inside my house, and there have been several wrecks at the sharp curve east of the 400 overpass. Speeding on this drive is a serious issue. The most recent wreck referenced above happened last night. I heard it from my bedroom. I immediately got up, put on my clothes, grabbed my cell phone and flashlight, and went out the door. As mentioned before, I don't enjoy walking down my driveway to an accident site, wondering whether someone is mangled or dead. Last night, as I approached a wrecked car and saw a body hanging out of the passenger side window, lifeless-like, I was very apprehensive. It's an odd feeling standing there on the phone with the 911 operator, not knowing whether to try to pull a lifeless-like body out of the car or to just wait for the first responders. He was lucky. The next person may not be. Sometimes I hear cars and motorcycles going past my house. Sounds like they're going 100 miles an hour. If the police would take this issue of speeding on Roberts Drive seriously, there would be a lot less
Mr. Griffin, I need you to wrap up.
Thank you. I'll be back.
All right. There wasn't much doubt in my mind about that. Is there a motion to approve the meeting agenda? Mr. DiGiulio.
I move approval of the meeting agenda for this record-breaking crowd we have here for Tuesday, January 21st, 2025.
We have a motion by Mr. DiGiulio. Is there a second? Motion by Mr. DiGiulio, seconded by Mr. Paulson to approve the meeting agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on approval of the meeting agenda. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. Moving to the consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Mayor Powell.
Ms. Rochelle.
I move that we approve the consent agenda for Tuesday, January 21st.
We have a motion by Ms. Rochelle. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Ms. Rochelle, seconded by Ms. Mueller, that we approve the consent agenda. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on approval of the consent agenda. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The consent agenda is approved. Moving to public hearings, the clerk will please read the first item.
Here we go. Excuse me. This is agenda item number 2025-16. This is U-24-3, Mount Vernon School, 510 Mount Vernon Highway. Consideration of a request for a conditional use permit to amend the conditions of use permit U-17-0001 to allow illumination of the existing athletic field. This is presented by Planning and Zoning Manager Michelle McIntosh Ross.
Ms. McIntosh Ross.
I brought my water with me. Oops. Okay, good evenings, Mayor and City Council. I'm here to present the conditional use permit U-24-3, the Mount Vernon School located at 510 Mount Vernon Highway. You can go to the next slide. Staff recommends, I'm doing this? Okay. Staff recommends approval with conditions, and the Planning Commission voted unanimously to recommend denial of this application. Okay. So the applicants are requesting a conditional use permit to amend the conditions of a previous use permit U-17-0001 to allow illumination of the existing athletic field. The Mount Vernon School is zoned RE2, residential estate, minimum 2 acres, and abuts RD18 and RD7.5, these are residential detached homes, to the west and to the south, and RT3, which is residential townhome homes, to the east. The Mount Vernon School is within the protected neighborhood character area, as are the surrounding residential neighborhoods. Here to the left is the aerial image of the Mount Vernon School outlined in teal blue. To the right is a survey of existing conditions on the site. The north rectangle is the athletic field that the applicants are requesting to install lights. These are some images showing the existing athletic fields at the school. Here are some additional pictures of the athletic field, and the picture to the left and to the bottom is showing a view from the athletic field towards the property line of the closest adjacent neighbors. So we just gave you that additional view. This proposal seeks to amend a condition of zoning that carried over from the original 2003 special use permit, as well as the 2017 special use permit U-17-0001 that prohibited the installation of lights on the athletic field. This application is a proposal to install lights as per the photometric plan to the left provided by the applicant. This photometric plan shows the athletic field with the 4 proposed light fixtures located labeled F1, F2, F3, and F4, and is also indicated by the blue ovals, as you can see on the slide. The light fixtures are mounted on two 60-foot and two 70-foot poles located significantly further at double the distance from the adjacent property line than the code allows. This schematic also shows the proposed photometric readings of the light spillage that at the adjacent residential property lines to the west, the Mount Vernon Woods neighborhood. The plan proposes to limit light spillage where the school property abuts residential properties, and so they are limiting the light spillage to a reading of 0.00 foot candles. That's how we measure light spillage. So they're limiting that to 0.0 everywhere along the adjacent property lines, except for at the spot circled in white to the west of the athletic field, where the proposed measurement is 0.1 foot candles. The city's code allows light spillage to a maximum of 0.5 foot candles at adjacent residential property lines. With this applicant's proposed measurements of 0.01 and 0.1 foot candles, the applicant is well below the 0.5 standard allowed for the city in the city's codes. The computer-generated renderings to the right were provided by the applicant to demonstrate the proposed appearance of the lighting when installed. The lighting technology proposes to limit the illumination just to the edges of the athletic field as demonstrated. The application also proposes to limit glare from the lights to 981 candelas. This is the measurement of glare. Additionally, the applicant is committing to achieving dark sky international certification. These are the considerations that staff evaluated. As far as use permit considerations, within the RE2 zoning district and in protected neighborhood, a school and its accessory structures to include lights is an allowable use via a conditional use permit. The school and the proposed light installation complies with the lighting standards per the city codes regarding height of the poles, distance from the property lines to residential properties, as well as the light spillage off of the field and glare emitting from the light source. The proposed light installation is compatible with the existing principal use as a school and within the existing RE2 zoning and protected neighborhood character area. The applicant has provided a mitigation plan to further screen the adjacent properties to minimize the ability to see the lights from the neighboring properties. As far as the goals of the comprehensive plan, the next 10 includes schools as an appropriate land use within protected neighborhood. According to the next 10, the compatible land uses in a protected neighborhood character area are primarily single-family, detached residential and related accessory uses, civic uses that support residential uses such as schools and places of worship, and some single-family attached residential. We also analyzed staff. With the analysis, staff concluded that the proposal would meet all of the standards of a conditional use permit for the proposed use in this district. The advanced lighting technology proposed will result in less light spillage than city code allows. Staff believes that the resulting light spillage and limitations to the amount of usage will be less than what is allowed for other residential uses. The proposed vegetative buffer will help mitigate the visual impact. A proposed condition to the use permit imposes limitations on noise where no restriction exists today for schools. Staff believes that imposing this restriction on noise emanating from a school campus will alleviate the community's overwhelming concern related to the disturbance of peace and quiet. The restriction limits the noise level measured at the property line to that of normal room conversation. A proposed condition in this use permit restricts the applicant to a 1 hour earlier light cutoff time than the code allows. A proposed condition in this use permit restricts third-party rentals of the field. And a traffic study shows minimal impact to be generated resulting from the installation of the lights. After careful consideration and analysis of the city codes and policies, staff recommends approval of conditional use permit U-24-3 to allow the illumination of the existing athletic field subject to the following conditions. Please note the conditions of zoning from the 2017 use permit U17-0001, other than what will be amended, will remain intact and is shown in blue. So in other words, the conditions written in blue are from the previous use permit and will be carried forward to be part of this conditional use permit U-24-3. The proposed amendments are written in red, as you will see in the following slides. I will read the amendments into the record. So starting from condition 3D, to prohibit lighting of recreational fields except that the owner may illuminate the athletic field as shown and identified on the survey dated February 1, 2023, also known as Ron Hill Field, consistent with the following standards. 1. The installed lighting system shall perform in a manner substantially consistent with the lighting information package provided by Moscow Sports Lighting, LLC, dated March 21, 2024, and received by the Community Development Department September 23, 2024. 2. Phase 2 certification of Dark Sky International shall be achieved before the first use of the lighting system for an athletic contest or practice. Use of the lighting system, 3. Use of the lighting system is prohibited on Saturdays and Sundays. 4. Use of the lighting system is prohibited annually between May 15th and August 15th. 5. Use of the lighting system is prohibited annually between December 15th and January 15th. 6. All events must be scheduled to conclude in time for field lighting to be turned off no later than 9:30 p.m. Illumination of the playing field may be permitted after the curfew only to conclude a scheduled event that was unable to conclude before 9:30 p.m. due to unusual circumstances, such as medical intervention, overtime, or power outages. In such circumstances, illumination of the playing field must conclude no later than 10:30 p.m. 7. Vegetative screening on Ron Hill Field shall be installed within the area labeled Phase 1 screening on the layout and landscaping phasing plan dated November 14, 2024, and received by the Community Development Department November 18, 2024, prior to the first use of the lighting system for an athletic contest or practice. Such vegetative screening shall, and at a minimum, be substantially consistent with the campus planting plan dated November 14, 2024, and received by the Community Development Department November 18, 2024, provided that the owner may, in consultation with the city arborist, install alternative vegetative screening as specified in private agreements entered into by the owner and individual owners of adjoining property. 3D continues with 8. The proposed buffer plantings that are located along the edge of the football field, but within the 100-foot setback from the protected neighborhoods, shall be designated as a permanent vegetative buffer to be maintained and infilled to maintain the intent of a visual screen for the neighbors as per the landscape plan that has been approved by the city arborist. 9. Buffer plantings must be 8 feet installed height, full to the ground. 10. The owner shall replace any new plantings within the first 3 years after installation. After the 3-year period, the owner shall maintain all the plantings installed for the purpose of screening the residential neighbors as per the landscape plan that has been approved by the city arborist. We're inserting 3G. The sound system in use at Ron Hill Field shall not create a sound level in excess of 65 dBA when measured at or outside the property boundary line. All these conditions on slide 13 are carried over from the previous use permit, U17-0001, will remain intact. We go on with number 4 is inserted, related to third-party rentals. So it reads, 4, to the owner's agreement to abide by the following requirements for third-party rentals. A, the owner shall only be allowed to rent any outdoor athletic facility to organizations using the field for participants aged 18 years or younger. B, any rental use of any outdoor athletic facility is prohibited on Sundays. Any rental use of any outdoor athletic facility shall not include the use of any amplified sound or sound systems. And D, any rental use of any outdoor athletic facility shall not include the use of lights or the new lighting system on the Ron Hill field. And that's the end of the conditions.
All right.
But I still
Okay.
have just...
All right. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no problem. So staff believes, in addition to the applicant's proposal that meets and abides by the standards set forth in the city's codes and comprehensive plan, these conditions further restrict the applicant to less light spillage than the code allows, and earlier light cutoff time than the code allows, less noise than the code allows by imposing a restriction to noise where schools are currently exempt. These conditions also impose additional restrictions on third-party rentals, additional requirements for vegetative screening, limitations to the days of the week and months of the year that the school can use the lights, prohibiting the use of the field with lights on Saturdays and Sundays, and a mandate to achieve dark sky international certification. Oh, I'm sorry, one more thing. Let's see. Okay, so this slide, for demonstration purposes, staff received over 400 public comments via email and city online portal. We were able to map the addresses of these comments that were received via the online portal only, and as of last Thursday, January 16th at 4:42 p.m., our GIS department prepared this map to show the geographic spread of the comments and color-coded those in favor as green and those opposed in red. The overall comments that the planning department received from all sources showed 42% in favor and 58% in opposition. And that is my presentation.
All right. Before we start the rest of the meeting, let me go ahead and kind of lay out the process that we're going to follow. Both sides will have 20 minutes to discuss. Normally you get 10. So we've doubled the amount of time. The applicant goes first. They control their time. They can designate it any way they wish, and if there's any time that they do not use, they can reserve their time for rebuttal after the opposition is completed. The opposition, I think, has submitted a list of people and things that they want to present. We will take those in the order that they come, and then we will, after the public comment period is over, then it comes to council, and we will entertain motions at that point. So with that, we'll turn it over to the applicant.
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Baumann.
I have a parliamentary inquiry.
State your inquiry.
If members of this council have any questions for staff that might well inform some of the public comment, and I would suggest limited questions, would this not be an opportune time to ask some of those questions of staff?
If as long as there's no objection, I would permit it.
Okay. Does anybody else have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
All right, Mr. DiGiulio.
Ms. McIntosh, oh, it's on. Ms. McIntosh Ross, has the city ever allowed a school in the past to have lights on an athletic field? Have we ever approved one of
Yes.
those? Because I don't remember us approving one.
Well,
Your memory's obviously better than mine.
it wasn't during my days, but I know the Weber School has lights. That's a private
Excuse me?
school. Weber School, private school on Roswell Road.
And we approve those?
Mhm.
Okay. And is that the only one?
That I know of. Okay.
Oh,
Here
here
comes
comes
Ms.
the
Sotile,
boss.
charging to the microphone.
The Weber School did not have a prohibition against lights. Our code allows schools to have lights. So if there is no prohibition, they were able to submit an application, not through you, but through the building department to install those lights. And it was probably within the past 2 years.
But has the council ever approved lights on a athletic field for any school in Sandy Springs?
Not since I've been here, which is about 9 years. That's my recollection.
Okay, because I don't recall any either, and I was just wondering if maybe your memory was better than mine.
Would it be correct, Ms. Sotal, to say that the reason this is before council tonight is because previously there had been a prohibition about lights, and the only way to do that is for a vote by this body? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Baumann.
Well, hold on, Ginger. The prohibition is in the current CUP, is that right?
Yes, it was in the original CUP, I think, which was 2003. And then it was carried over when the school did another cup in 2017.
Right. And is there precedence for property owners that operate under CUPs to come in for modified CUPs?
All the time, yes.
And that's not unprecedented at all.
That's correct.
And I think, just to clarify, the default position of the city through its development code is that, but for a prohibition of lights, that lights would be allowed. Is that right?
That's correct.
And lights would be allowed every day of the week?
Right. There is no prohibition for times during the week that they wouldn't be allowed. That's correct.
To 10:30 p.m.?
Right. I think it's 11.
10:30 or half an hour after.
Okay. And they can rent the field?
Yes, there's nothing in the code that speaks to that.
And the decibel level would be 0.75?
There is no restriction for schools for sound at this juncture. It's silent on that, so they could have bands, they could have games without restriction to sound.
Tell us how, can you just give us a little bit more color on how you go through the process of reaching a recommendation and reconciling factors, including the situation on the ground, the comp plan, and the development code?
Do you want to?
So in our conditional use permit, we have a set of criteria that we look at, and in our staff report, we list those criteria, and we were able to see that the applicant met all of those, and in most of the circumstances, they exceeded those. I can go through each of the criteria.
No, I don't need you to do that. I'm just asking about your process. So,
Mr. Baumann, can you suspend just one moment? We need folks over on this side that are standing in the aisle to move to the wall, if you would, please. Thank you. All right, proceed.
So, in this case, we don't have, you're not just saying remove the condition and then lights or whatever they're allowed under the code. There are conditions. How did we arrive at these conditions? Was this something that staff just sort of pulled out of thin air? How did you all arrive at? What was the role of both parties? Was there any role of the parties, the applicant, or those in giving public comment to this? So can you help us a little bit understand how we get to the conditions?
Yeah, so as you know, with all of these conditional use permits, we have public meetings that happen before, a community meeting with the neighbors, and based on those comments from the neighborhoods that voice their opinions at the public meetings, the school proposed several conditions and forwarded those to us. We as staff also attended those public meetings, and so we added a few that maybe we heard from the community that we felt like would address some of those concerns that the community had. So based on what the applicant provided to us and what we felt also based on what we've heard, and of course all of the comments we've been getting through emails, we felt like these were a good set of conditions that addressed the concerns.
And not to be cute, I mean, so we understand, the vast majority of the people that are opposed to this don't want this at all. And I think I respect that opinion, that it's largely a binary thing. It's not like they don't want to get into a conversation of in between. It's no lights, and I respect that position. But you nonetheless still took into consideration the comments at arriving. You've taken into consideration all of the comments at arriving at these conditions. If the council, in hearing comments tonight, wanted to in any way modify, impose additional conditions, there is a process for us to do that. Is that right?
Yes, you can come up with conditions, additional conditions, that if the rest of the body approves it, we can add it.
And would it be appropriate for us to ask, for example, the applicant how they feel about that?
Correct, yes.
It might even be appropriate for us to ask those who speak on behalf of an opposing point of view how they feel about that. Is that right?
That's okay, too, yes.
All right, just one final question. And the council adopted the development code, right?
Yes.
I mean, the council approved. This development code was heard and adopted by the
Yes,
city council.
and
All right.
the
Mr.
comprehensive plan as
Baumann,
well.
I'm done.
You're getting into areas of parliamentary procedure, so that is inappropriate for the staff. Okay, thank you. Anybody else? All right, let's proceed. Just so that we're clear, as I say, 20 minutes per side. The applicant goes first. They control their time. The opposition has submitted a list of people that it would like to have. The one thing that we will insist upon, this is a very emotional subject. We get it. We understand on both sides. The only thing that I'm going to insist on is decorum. No booing, no clapping, no outbursts of any kind. If you do, you'll be asked to leave. You're welcome here, but we are going to maintain decorum. We're going to treat each other like neighbors, even though we may not be neighborly all the way through this process, but we are going in this room, we're going to be treat other folks with respect and dignity on both sides. And I hope that that's clear enough that I don't have to say anything else. All right. The applicant, Mr. Collins.
Thank you, Mayor Paul. As a matter of housekeeping, we've got multiple speakers, and I ask that we pause during the transition, if that's okay.
You got 20 minutes. I'd go.
All right, then we'll be very quick, everybody. Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm Chip Collins, 200 Cameron Ridge Drive, Sandy Springs. I've got some prepared notes, but I want to jump right into some of the issues that you've already raised. First of all, the most important thing I heard from the planning director was the city code allows schools to have lighted athletic fields. In response to Mr. DiGiulio's question, I'm not aware of the city ever voting in favor of athletic field lights, but I'm also not aware of the city ever denying a request for athletic lights. I think this is a case of first impression. We've already got older schools that already have lights. We've got Riverwood High School, North Springs High School, and then they talked about Weber School. Another important thing that I think we heard from staff is that the code does address this issue, and the school's application meets and exceeds every criteria for this approval. Before I go any further, there was talk about conditions. Staff read all the conditions, but I wanted to just go ahead and get out there. We've listened to the community. We've continued to listen. We've listened to staff. We've listened to mayor and council. And I want to talk about some additional conditions that we have floated out there and proposed for consideration by this body that I think even go further to do everything possible to protect these neighbors. And I want to point out one thing.
Mr. Collins, do you have those in writing that you could share with?
I've shared them already with the staff. I sent them out, I believe, Saturday or Sunday this weekend, but I'm happy to share them again. But I want to go ahead and, well, first let me say one thing. The school negotiated for months with the city to try and reach a compromise here. But there was no room for compromise. The school worked with the neighborhood for months to reach a compromise. And there was no compromise to be had because, as Mr. Baumann said, the only message we got from the school was there were no conditions under which they would agree to have lights. And so to be clear, the school has not rejected one proposed condition. The school will do anything. Tell us where to build a tree. Tell us, and well, it's clear in the record all the things that the school have done, and they've already talked about the conditions. But quickly, I want to talk about some of the other conditions that the school is willing to do to address the concerns that have been raised. Lights to be used on Fridays a maximum of 10 times per year. This is in deference to our Jewish community. The lights may illuminate the field a maximum of 60 days. That's less than 20% of the year that you can have lights on these fields, subject to a maximum of 10 on Fridays. With regard to the practice fields on the new 10 acres that aren't even developed yet, we're agreeable to no amplified sound ever on those lights. There's already a deed restriction. On those fields, there's already a deed restriction. There can never be lights on those fields. No amplified sound when Ron Hill Field is illuminated except for official athletic competitions, games. No practices, no band concerts. That's it. Additionally, we want to be a good neighbor. We've proposed that the school maintain a neighborhood liaison committee. We've proposed that a school representative be on site whenever lights or the sound system are in use to ensure compliance. We've agreed to post the conditions on the school's public-facing website and communicate it to all of our coaches. I want to leave time for our other speakers, so let me just talk about why. What's the reason behind this application? It's the right decision. Approval of this application is the right decision morally, legally, and politically. I'm going to talk about the moral, the good, the overall good, and then I'm going to sit down for a while and let these other folks talk. But what this application does, what the addition of these lights does, it allows for greater participation in sports. The additional hours of on-campus practice time allows the school to provide more kids with more opportunities for participation in sports. With just 60 extra days a year of practice, 60 illuminated days, the school will be able to add at least 2 additional girls teams, including a girls lacrosse team and a middle school girls flag football team. That adds opportunities for at least 60 additional participants in team sports per season. This is a safety issue. It's getting hotter. You can't even practice outside when temperatures reach 92 degrees. This also right now, the Mount Vernon kids have to get on buses, cars, and go to off-site. This keeps kids off the roads and on campus. But finally, community. Sandy Springers, this is about community, and that's what this city is about and has been about for the last 20 years. Sandy Springers often describe ourselves as having a small-town atmosphere existing in a large metro area. There's nothing more small-town iconic than Friday Night Lights. For a high school that provides a community gathering event like no other, it's not just about the players who get the thrill of playing under the lights on a cool fall evening. It's about their parents getting to make a game that they might otherwise not get to make if it starts at 4 o'clock on a work day. It's about the cheerleaders getting to perform in an electric atmosphere. It's about the girls' teams getting their turn at the excitement of playing under the lights. And it's about the non-playing students and their parents coming together to spend an evening with their friends and families, just like the kids at Riverwood, North Springs, Walton, Marist, Westminster, and Lovett get to do every Friday night and also during the week. Finally, I want to talk about the importance of neighborhood schools. Recently, many of you have rightly gotten behind the effort to prevent the closure of Spalding Drive Elementary School, a beloved neighborhood school. Many have cited the importance of having a walkable school in the middle of a neighborhood, citing it as a major draw that attracts people to the area. Similarly, Mount Vernon is a neighborhood school. 455 students at Mount Vernon live in Sandy Springs, and more than 30 Mount Vernon families live in the adjacent neighborhoods of Mount Vernon Woods, Gates of Glen Ridge, and Aria West. A denial of this request would unnecessarily handicap one of Sandy Springs' most precious assets. It would unnecessarily restrict the school from providing a full array of sports opportunities. And it would prevent these kids from enjoying the same experience that other high schools all over the country get to enjoy. With that, I'm going to let some other folks talk, and I'll be back. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Christy Lindstrom, and I proudly serve as the head of school at Mount Vernon. I'm a local resident living at 5830 Hildebrand Drive, and I'm here tonight to advocate on behalf of the 1,200-plus students and parents we serve each day. For me, kids go first. The 20-year agreement with Mount Vernon Woods and the Mount Vernon School is set to expire without renewal. During this time, we have been grateful to the neighborhood for their partnership and support. So much progress has been made as a Sandy Springs community over this time. We are eager to follow suit. Moving forward, I want to state firmly that I will take full responsibility that our school will comply with the conditions in this agreement. It is also my responsibility to shepherd our students' academic, social, and health and well-being as they grow and develop. Facilities are a critical part to that. To hold back our progress is to hold back our children. And I know that you agree with me that is unacceptable. We need to be able to use our field for more practices for current teams and expand to new teams, especially as girls' sports grows. Sandy Springs was recently recognized as the number 4 school in the the number 4 city in the country for millennials to relocate to. Millennials want great schools. They want great programs that offer excellent people, programs, and facilities. I know this council supports education. Like Mr. Collins, I've seen what you've done to support North Springs and also Spalding. I ask you tonight to vote for our school. My students are going to come up and speak. They believe their voice matters. They believe and know they should advocate when they care, and I ask that you listen to what they have to say.
My name is Brad Dehem. I'm in the 10th year as the athletic director at Mount Vernon. Our girls' teams benefit from the lights. The flag.
Could you give us your address?
Yes, I'm sorry. 5070 Trail Ridge Way in Dunwoody. Our girls' team would benefit from the lights. The flag football team plays its region games in November after daylight savings. Because of this, our girls have never played a region tri-match at home in the 4 years that we've existed as a team. In my first year, I watched a boy sit in his locker, collapse to the floor at halftime, lose consciousness, and be rushed to the hospital by ambulance. Since then, there have been numerous other heat-related incidents during games. The most recent was last August when 10 players suffered severe heat cramps and a boy was rushed to be submerged in an ice bath post-game. Sandy Springs is a progressive and forward-thinking city. This August, 498 Georgia high schools will be fielding a football team. Only one school will host a game at 4:30 p.m. in the hottest part of the day, Mount Vernon School in Sandy Springs. Should we be the only city in the state promoting a school with the highest technological advances in sports field lighting? Or should we instead be the only city in the state that has a school playing games in dangerous heat in August? We should be a progressive city that cares for its families. We hear a lot about protecting the neighborhood. Your vote to say yes is protecting the neighborhood. Limits on when to light the field, limit on who lights the field, limit on who rents the field, limits on field usage with and without lights, limits on field use on Sundays, creating natural visual barriers for neighbors, sound and light regulations that are more restrictive than the city's own basic regulations. This is protecting the neighborhood. Passing this will implement neighborhood-friendly guidelines and is the only way to protect homes when the neighborhood agreement expires in September. Protect our children, protect the neighborhoods, and vote yes to lighting the field.
Good evening, members of the City Council, the Mount Vernon School, and fellow Sandy Springs residents. My name is Henry Stalzer, and I'm a senior at Mount Vernon. I've been a proud member of this community for 7 years and the Mount Vernon community for 6. I live at 1700 Brandon Hall Drive, and today I'm here not only as a resident, but a representative of the student athletes at Mount Vernon. I would like to thank you for allowing me to speak on why lights would be so helpful for our school. At Mount Vernon, I've had the privilege of being a part of our varsity lacrosse team for all 4 years of high school, a sport that's taught me teamwork, leadership, and created lifelong friendships. Not having lights for our field has created many challenges for our teams, and including the middle school, who wish to use that field. Practices and games are often cut short, forcing us to squeeze into the few daylight hours available. Sometimes we're even forced to travel 20 minutes to another field or practice on non-regulation sized fields. In the fall and the spring, this means sacrificing valuable practice time and rescheduling games. Without lights, we also struggle to accommodate all other sports and activities that wish to share that field, creating a ripple effect that impacts all the athletic programs and class time we have to miss due to travel. Not having lights also creates a larger underlying issue, especially in the southern heat. The temperatures during practices often reach 80 to 90 degrees, and this heat is a truly silent threat. Practicing during these peak sunlight hours increases the risk of dehydration, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke, all of which have severe short and long-term health issues. These conditions not only hinder athletic performance, but could jeopardize the future of our athletes. By adding lights to our field, we could shift practices and games to cooler evening hours, significantly reducing these risks and prioritizing the safety and safety of our well-being. Imagine the difference between having a fully lit field where games are played under the stars and families and friends gathered without worrying about rushing against the sunlight. For me and my teammates and every other student athlete at Mount Vernon, it would mean the world. It's not just about playing sports, it's about creating memories, learning life lessons, and fostering school pride. Regardless of the outcome today, I hope that as a community we can remember to respect one another. Adding lights to the Ron Hill Field is not just progress for our school, but also as a community. It's about giving us a chance to shine, literally and figuratively.
Kenneth Woods, 6555 Century Hill Trail in Mount Vernon Woods. So I'm a parent, I'm on the board, and I live in Mount Vernon Woods. I have the trifecta going on. And so I love my neighborhood, love my neighbors. You know, this is one thing I fully support, especially after the new conditions that were being proposed from there. I moved here for City Springs, for that school, and for being in this area. It's a really great area, and the school is a big part of that, the value it really brings up. So I want to see the school continue to increase. But there's 4 main reasons. I'm on the board, so I get to see Christy and her staff work basically every month. I go to meetings almost every couple of weeks, and I know they'll do what they say they're going to do. Mitigation measures are unlike any other. I've been to Gainesville twice and seen the lights, and they're incredible. The cutoff is what it is. It's what it says. I was there. It took several people to be able to see it. It's a real thing. The noise, what they're talking about with the additional fields, because I'm closer to that end of it, I think all that is unbelievable, and they're exceeding all the requirements. And the code allows for lights. It's the reason it's actually in the code, even with protected neighborhoods. This is the reason the mitigation factors are there, and we've greatly exceeded that so much that I'm in favor for that. And then most importantly, the new conditions about limiting the days. We're literally down to a couple of months out of the year spread between random months when you don't need it with daylight savings hours. The 10 Friday night lights and then 50 more days. And so that's the reason as a neighbor I am for this. Thank you. And can we reserve all our time for rebuttal?
Sure. All right. We'll now move to the opposition. Madam Clerk, will you read the first? Mr. Westmoreland?
Yes.
We'll recognize you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Before I begin, is this a 2-minute limit?
You have control of your time, but everybody else will have 2 minutes. So you...
All right, I'll be close to that. Carl Westmoreland, 908 West Wesley Road, Atlanta, on behalf of Mount Vernon Woods and Aria West. My first involvement with this property and this issue was in 2015 when I represented Ashton Woods in the approval of Aria West. That application also included 10 acres that Tom Glenn donated to the school. We negotiated restrictions on the school's use of that 10 acres. It's not been developed yet. It's 4 fields, but there were restrictions that prohibited lights and also addressed sound. So while that property is not a part of this application, the condition that was restated there about lights first appeared in 2003 in the Fulton County use permit that approved the school, restated in 2007 when Sandy Springs approved the first use permit on that. Again, as I said, in 2015 with ours, and then in 2017, the school applied for another use permit which consolidated the balance of the school property with the 10 acres that they received in 2016. Then 1 month after approval of that 2017 use permit, the city adopted the new development code. In the motion to adopt, Councilmember Sterling added a provision that conditions restricting ball field lighting or sound would be carried over. Now, whether that applies to the 2017 use permit or not, it certainly shows a great sensitivity to those issues in light of the new code. The definition of protected neighborhoods is, as I have always understood it, one of the most sacrosanct provisions in the Next 10 concept. In fact, CDP says that it's city policy to, quote, minimize the intrusion of light, sound, traffic, and nighttime activity associated with non-residential uses into protected neighborhoods. Therefore, there should be a heightened scrutiny of the use permit standards when a protected neighborhood is involved. And that is, that the use must be compatible and that adverse impacts will be effectively mitigated. Now, the applicant takes a position that the compatibility is satisfied by the fact that they meet a couple of standards in the code with regard to lights and sounds. There are other standards, however, and those standards apply throughout the city. They apply along 285. They apply to Weber, for example, at Abernathy and Roswell Road. And public schools clearly are inapplicable. The school has been compatible for over 20 years with these neighborhoods as it has been conditioned. And the primary condition that has made it compatible is the prohibition of lights. Allowing lights with the extension of hours and noise crosses the line into incompatibility. If the concept of protected neighborhoods means anything, this application needs to be denied. Thanks.
Next, we have Kimberly Oliver.
Ms. Oliver, it would be helpful if the next people would get lined up.
Next, we have
Kimberly
Rhonda Smith,
Oliver,
volume
President of
3.
Mount Vernon Woods Community Association, 6485 Williamson Drive. I had a slide I was going to put up, but as you can see, the school is surrounded by 4 protected neighborhoods, which is Mount Vernon Woods, Aria West, Gates of Glenridge, and Glenview. Ron Hill Field is exactly 100 feet from Mount Vernon Woods and Aria West property lines. That's the minimum allowed distance. Skip a couple slides, please. The school received a land disturbance permit in September 2024 to clear the heavily wooded 100-year-old forest to build 2 new athletic fields, leaving very little buffer. So I'm not sure what slide you want, but slide 4. Yeah. Over the past year, we surveyed neighbors from the most impacted neighborhoods to determine what they wanted. Out of 320 responses, more than 95% to the school's application to install, they opposed the school's application to install lights. That's just those are the adjacent neighborhoods. Then in open records, we received 400 public comments submitted to community development from September through January 5th. Using deep analysis sorted by zip code and the use of public records to research every address, we determined whether address was in Sandy Springs, Atlanta, Brookhaven, or Dunwoody. The results are almost 95% of the 4 adjacent neighborhoods are opposed. Over 78 of the comments from the 30328 zip code were opposed, and almost 74% of the Sandy Springs residents were opposed. Any comment opposed or in favor that lived outside of Sandy Springs was excluded. Over 60% of Mount Vernon students live outside of Sandy Springs. The school is located in the community, but it is not a neighborhood school. There are fewer than 15 Mount Vernon families that live in the adjacent neighborhoods, and that's from all the directories of the neighborhood community associations. Every single person who does not live in one of the 4 protected neighborhoods on a daily basis cannot understand, yet much less acknowledge what the concern is and will be made worse by the addition of the lights and all the activity that comes with the lights after dark. Protect our neighborhood and deny this application.
Madam Clerk, is there any way we can see the clock while we're doing this too?
I think so.
All right, somebody work on that because I can't keep up with the time otherwise.
Okay. Rhonda Smith, who's followed by Paul Klezek.
Okay, can we get the slides back up and have the clock in the corner, please? Yes, no? And you can go to the next slide, please. One more. Nope. That went backwards. Sorry. There we go. Thank you. The city's future vision, formed by community collaboration, driven by comprehensive plan directives designed to protect those who may not be able to protect themselves. Comprehensive plan protections are the resource neighborhoods have. You are charged with upholding these. Quote, our beautiful residential neighborhoods offer an exemplary quality of life, but require measures to protect them. This is the concern embedded in our plan. Plan language documents land use character saying, as you all know, protected neighborhood is the preponderance of residential land use. Contrarily, in the very same paragraph, the public documents documents institutional land uses as public and private schools, government facilities, and cemeteries. All uses void of residential character. Please don't disregard any of the 4 directives that the 2017 plan charges you with. These did not change in the 2022 5-year update. If you could go to the next slide, please. These directives articulate a vision. We're lost on the slide, sorry. Articulate a vision goal. It is to preserve and sustain quality by protecting the character of existing neighborhoods. 2, identify a need for the goal. It is protect and enhance neighborhood character and quality of life. 3, provide this policy for the need. It is, quote, maintain the integrity of existing single-family neighborhoods. Protect them from the physical encroachment of non-residential uses. 4, define actions to achieve that policy. And what is the action? Minimize the intrusion of light, sound, traffic, and nighttime activity associated with non-residential land uses. While a code provision may be met, the school examples made are public schools exempt from our zoning. Field lighting impacts are inconsistent with all 4 of these. In the 2017 Companion Development Code adoption, in the discussion, Mayor Paul, you said in one breath, quote, we have also made sure that the neighborhoods are protected. You should have a reasonable expectation when you move into a neighborhood that it will be the same kind of neighborhood when you decide to leave. End quote. Council of Neighborhoods asks you to deny this application.
Time check.
I'm Paul Plesick, 650 Cares Drive in the Mount Vernon Woods neighborhood. The application fails to meet the city's approval criteria regarding compatibility with adjacent use and mitigation of adverse impacts. In contrast to the school's computer renderings, you've all seen the pictures of what these fields across Georgia and Florida actually look like. Dark sky certification notwithstanding, these intensely bright lights create an industrial look that's not compatible with the adjacent protected neighborhoods. Next slide, please. We will experience that adverse visual impact of this industrial look even more so when the school removes the existing vegetation in phase 2 of its plans. The areas circled indicate all the vegetation that's going to be taken out by the school to build their new practice fields. Next slide. And that's not a future thing. Today, they have in hand a land disturbance permit to remove 185 protected and landmarked trees, along with countless other smaller trees and bushes. Here's just an example from that approved in-hand land disturbance permit. Next slide, please. But it's not just the lights. It's the new activity after dark with its attendant noise that will forever change the quiet evening character of our protected neighborhoods. Noise that sound experts agree cannot be effectively mitigated. The school's landscape contractor verified this in a public meeting. An expert that we consulted said it's not possible given the topography and the proximity. Neither the Forest Service nor the Georgia DOT endorses vegetation as sound mitigation. As subsequent speakers will attest, daytime sound is currently heard throughout the protected neighborhoods. Please understand, we tolerate this as our part of the compromise of 2003 that established the school, a compromise that was reiterated in the 2017 conditional use permit that approved the school's expansion. We supported the school, and they promised to limit noisy outdoor activity to daylight hours. Having gotten what they want in those agreements, they now want to renege on their part of the compromise. Next slide. When the school replants the buffer with 2.5-inch diameter trees spaced 20 feet apart, the after dark noise will travel more freely and the neighborhoods will have an even clearer view of the industrial look. I urge you to deny the school's application on the basis that it fails to meet the compatibility and mitigation approval criteria. Thank you very much.
I'm Steve Leeds, 6410 Radiant Trace, Sandy Springs. I'm president of the Aria West Homeowners Association, a 99-home protected neighborhood. Next slide, please. I want to do a bit of myth-busting and comment on the extensive efforts the neighborhood's made to negotiate with Mount Vernon School toward finding an effective mitigation to the material adverse impact that the lights and attendant noise would have to the quiet and peaceful enjoyment of the surrounding neighborhoods. With Mount Vernon Woods, we created a working group of 6 that met for in-person discussions with the leadership of the school, many times over a 4-month period, considering their proposals with outside experts, visited Musco lighted sites, talked, Zoomed, and emailed countless times over the last 18 months, all to no avail. Against a 20-plus year history of no lights, and currently with after dark quiet, free from activities, lights, noise, and traffic, the school now asks you to impose these significant adverse impact changes on 4 protected neighborhoods. Nothing they proposed effectively alleviates the material adverse impact the lights and after dark noise will have on our communities. It's not consistent with the residential character of the community, and it would constitute light and noise intrusion that is inconsistent with the next 10 protections. Some folks don't think this is a big deal. To those of us living here, believe me, it is. Dave Nichols recently reminded folks that Eva Galambos was most concerned with protecting Sandy Springs neighbors and neighborhoods. We respectfully urge you not to impose these forever burdens on our protected neighborhoods.
Good evening, Matt LaMarche, 485 Heritage Way in Sandy Springs. I live in Mount Vernon Woods, as you all know, and served as the president of the HOA for 4 years, from 2015 to 2019. In 2015 and again in 2017, the Mount Vernon School approached us about adding lights to their existing and what would become their proposed fields. The requests came with offers of financial compensation for our community association. We rejected both of those requests based on input from our neighbors as well as the other new subdivisions. But we did grant several other conditions that greatly benefited the school. One of those including saving the school hundreds of thousands of dollars by reducing our buffer and giving them the opportunity to remove a very expensive retaining wall. The school agreed both times that the lights were not a necessity, that the prohibition of the lights would be written into the terms of the 2017 CUP. During last month's Planning Commission meeting, as he just said, Commissioner Nichols recalled being part of that discussion and saying the school was now going back on everything that they had promised in 2017 as well as 2015. As you know, they voted 6-0 on that. The school is the de facto developer of that campus and its expansion of the institutional uses. The use permit condition laws enforced today and now for the last 20 years are the protections and the assurances of those protected neighborhoods that their quality of life will not be diminished. Without the sewer easement, the Snodgrasses, my neighbors here, and without other variances and concessions from the protected neighborhoods, Mount Vernon School would not be what it is today. Mount Vernon Woods has been great neighbors to this school, and we want to see the school continue to grow and thrive. We simply don't want lights, and we don't want the noise in our backyards. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm John Snodgrass, 599 Carriage Drive, Mount Vernon Woods. My wife and I have lived in Mount Vernon Woods for 48 years. When Mount Vernon Presbyterian Church and school leaders were speaking with Tom Glenn about acquiring 30 acres of his land for the upper campus, they came to us to request a sewer easement. Without it, the upper campus could not be built. We granted the easement in exchange for the promise that lights would never be installed on the athletic field. Is there a difference between a verbal and a written promise? We trusted the school's word, so we didn't ask for it in writing. Mike Collins, the upper school campus architect, stated on January 8, 2025, just a couple weeks ago, quote, "My understanding was there could never, ever be lights," end quote. What are we teaching our children if promises can be broken for convenience? The field is 100 feet from our property line. We can sit on our sofa and watch kids running up and down the field. On some game days, the scoreboard has stayed lit well into the night, disrupting sleep in our home and others. Can you imagine how disruptive it would be to have a lighted field along with the noise and the activity that comes with it 5 nights a week? This is not in keeping with the guidelines adopted under the city's comprehensive Next 10 plan. It says, quote, minimize the intrusion of light, sound, traffic, and nighttime activity associated with non-residential uses on single-family residential neighborhoods, end quote. The school doesn't want to keep its promises. I implore you, as city leaders, to keep yours. Please deny this application.
Good evening. My name is Ian Kelly. I live at 700 Glengate Place at the gates of Glenridge. I am deeply concerned about how the installation of lights at Mount Vernon School would impact our neighborhood's peaceful enjoyment of our properties. We are on the northern edge of the strip of woods we all share, and that gives us the largest and most dense buffer from Ron Hill Field. But even with the full length of that buffer, I can hear the noise from the field clearly during games and events. I certainly feel for my neighbors that live closer. The school is moving forward with plans to remove 10 acres of dense old wood growth to build 2 new fields. Combine the loss of those trees with the addition of stadium lights, and the noise would become exponentially worse with games and practices going on much later, up to 5 nights a week. These projects would come at the expense of the 4 protected neighborhoods that surround it. The school's board chair said in this room in front of a standing room only crowd at the final community meeting, quote, there is no benefit to the neighborhoods to have lights. We're trying really hard to make it as less bad as possible, end quote. The bright light glow and evening noise that will result from this application will forever change the character of these protected neighborhoods. I urge you to vote no on these lights. Thank you.
My name is Susan Keesack. I live at 6497 Cherry Tree Lane in Mount Vernon Woods. The neighbors of Mount Vernon Woods are united in our opposition to this plan to light the field. We knew it would ultimately come to you to protect our neighborhood and the others around the campus. We have faith in you because the lights, approving the lights would open the door for every neighborhood and every corner of Sandy Springs to be subjected to non-residential encroachment. We have faith in you because of the protections put in place in the Next 10 comprehensive plan. Dave Nichols said during last month's Planning Commission meeting that the school, quote, readily accepted the conditions that they would not put up lights in the 2017 Cup. And here we are 7 years later, and they've changed their mind. That's going back on everything they promised to us and the City Council to pass that Cup. They're turning their back on the neighborhoods, end quote. The third approval criteria in the Development Code under 11.3.6 for conditional use permit asks if, quote, the use is compatible with adjacent uses in terms of location, scale, site design, hours of operation, and operating characteristics, quote. The school use is compatible as it is without lights. It becomes incompatible with the addition of lights and those associated noise and other impacts that will come with the lights. Please protect our neighborhood and deny this petition.
Right, thank you. That closes the opposition's time. Mr. Collins for rebuttal and summation.
Thank you. I'll hit these in the order that I wrote them down. First, I want to dispel this notion of broken promises. The school has made one promise, and it's interesting you didn't hear about the 2003 agreement. They made one promise, and that was in 2003 in a binding agreement with Mount Vernon Woods, and that was we will not install lights for 20 years. That was put in a deed restriction, which also expires this year. That 20 years expires, and that's the only reason they're here. This notion of 2017, that's a red herring. There was no discussion in the record, in the minutes, in the application, in the staff report about lights on Ron Hill Field, and that's because the school still had 7 years left on its 20-year agreement, which it intended to adhere to. That's why there was no discussion. But there was certainly no discussion that they were never going to come back and seek lights after the 20-year deal expired. There's another way that you can document a prohibition forever against lights on a field. And the neighbors accomplished that with the 10 acres, and that's in a deed restriction. There was a deed restriction with regard to the 30 acres that includes Ron Hill Field. That deed restriction with regard to lights expires this year. The deed restriction with regard to the 10 acres is perpetual, and the school will never come back and ask for lights on that. Then the notion that lights are incompatible with residential neighborhoods. I live near Mayor Paul. I've lived within a quarter of a mile of Riverwood High School, a 6A team that has a lot more people come to its football games than this single A private school. I've lived on either side of it. Lights on that field are deemed by my neighbors as a benefit and not a burden. With regard to it, we're not a neighborhood school. And that's what I heard Ms. Oliver say, which is interesting because her own kids went to the school which is in her backyard, which is the definition of a neighborhood school. They also talked about their own survey and the amount of support in support of their position. Well, we submitted a petition, our own petition to the council that had almost 1,000 signatures of documented Sandy Springs residents with their names, addresses, and contact information. Look at the blue back here. Nobody can say there's not considerable support for this position. With regard to the development code, Rhonda Smith was talking about, nobody knows the code better than Rhonda, but it's interesting. This city has updated its development code 3 times recently, 2017, 2020, 2023. If this city's policy was no lit athletic fields next to protected neighborhoods or residential neighborhoods, this council and its predecessors had many opportunities to put that in its code and chose not to. Under your own code, as described by your staff, there's frankly no legally defensible position for a denial of this application. Let's see, real quick, 30 seconds summation. It's easy to say no. I've been up there. It's easy to say no. What's harder to say is how. And how can we balance the property rights and needs of valued institutions with the concerns of adjoining neighbors? And we've done this. Mount Vernon respectfully request the council to make the right decision for the good of these students here tonight and the thousands of students for years to come at Mount Vernon. We request that you approve our application. Thank you.
Thank you. That will close the public comment period for this. I want to thank everyone for your decorum. You've been very respectful, and I hope we'll continue that as we go through the evening. All right, you've heard the reports and the rebuttals and the presentations. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul.
Ms. Rochelle.
I move that we approve agenda item 2025-016, U-243, Mount Vernon School, for a conditional use permit to amend the conditions of use permit U-17-001 to allow illumination of the existing athletic field with staff conditions and 3 additional conditions. The 3 additional conditions would be amplified sound on the Ron Hill field is limited to 20 nights per year and must be official athletic competitions only. Lights are permitted 60 nights a year but limited to 10 Friday nights a year, and foregoing lights and sound on the new sports field to be constructed north of the Ron Hill field.
All right, we have a motion. Would you state that last one so I can make sure I got my notes right?
Foregoing lights and sound on the new sports field to be constructed north of the Ron Hill field.
Okay. All right, we have a motion by Ms. Rochelle. Is there a second?
I'll support.
I have a motion by Ms. Rochelle, seconded by Dr. Kelly, that we approve the cup with staff conditions and 3 additional conditions. Any discussion?
Yes.
Ms. Rochelle.
Okay. I have lived in Sandy Springs for 30 years, including 20 years in the Mount Vernon Woods neighborhood, where my home borders the property owned by Mount Vernon School and the Ron Hill field. Like many of my neighbors, I am deeply interested in how the school develops its property. Living less than 1,000 feet from the field, I understand the potential impacts of increased light, noise, and activity on nearby homes. However, after careful consideration and research, I support amending the conditional use permit as recommended by staff, plus the additional conditions. Their analysis was fact-based, thorough, and persuasive, and their conditions are fair and balanced. They and I have closely evaluated the protected neighborhood provisions, and I believe the school's proposal, with its numerous conditions and limitations, aligns with these guidelines. As part of my due diligence, I drove to Gainesville, Georgia, to observe how similar lights look and function in a residential setting. I wanted to ensure that my decision was formed by first-hand experience. I commend how Mount Vernon School has engaged with the community to find a path forward. They've hosted multiple meetings, which were heavily attended, and received hundreds of emails, many of which I've read myself. They've listened carefully to the concerns of abutting homeowners and neighbors, including legitimate worries about noise, light pollution, and traffic. In response, while never seeking to minimize these concerns, the school has put forward a thoughtful, sensible plan to manage and mitigate them. And additional proposed conditions include amplified sound on the Ron Hill Field is limited to official athletic competitions and may only be used for 20 nights per year. Lights without amplified sound may be used for additional events, but the total nights with lights are capped at 60 per year, including 20 nights with both lights and sound, and lights are further restricted to no more than 10 Friday nights annually. Number 3, prohibiting in all field rental agreements the use of light and sound, and foregoing lights and sound amplification on the new sports fields north of the Ron Hill Field. These additional conditions reflect Mount Vernon School's commitment to being a good neighbor while trying to achieve its goals for its students. Additionally, the school has offered to invest $25,000 to $30,000 to address the specific concerns of the family whose home is closest to the field. This has been a difficult decision. Some of my best friends live in Mount Vernon Woods, and I know that I wouldn't be sitting here today without the support of many of you in this room. I've spoken to many of my neighbors, read hundreds of emails, reviewed the comprehensive plan, and tried to help devise a compromise that could benefit the neighborhood and the school. Unfortunately, I found that some in the neighborhood had no interest in finding a solution. In one conversation, I asked if it would be acceptable if the lights were installed but could only be used one night per year. The answer was still no. Many objections to this proposal have been influenced by misinformation. I've heard repeated claims that the lights and sound will be on 365 nights a year until 11 p.m., which is simply untrue. Concerns about the lights causing health issues, increased crime, or reduced property values have also been raised. Some of these fears are unsupported and unreasonable, with no data or scientific evidence to back them up. Additionally, the claim that the lights will be a profit-making venture for the school is unfounded, as the proposal explicitly prohibits their use for rentals. My decision to support this amendment isn't just about how neighborhood concerns were mitigated, but also the benefits these lights bring to our community. Player safety is one of the most compelling reasons to support this proposal. Practices in Georgia can be dangerously hot, and having lights allows them to shift to cooler evening hours, reducing the risk of heat-related injuries. The data backs that up. Beyond safety, these lights create opportunities for growth, inclusion, and leadership. By adding lights, Mount Vernon School will be able to expand its athletic offerings and increase student participation in sports. Most importantly, they will introduce new programs like girls lacrosse and flag football teams. These opportunities are not just about athletics. They are about empowering young women, building future leaders, and fostering the invaluable life skills that come from being part of a team. I am particularly passionate about this aspect because I know firsthand how transformative these opportunities can be. The conditions recommended by staff, further refined and restricted by the school based on community input, represent a thoughtful resolution that balances the interests of the school and the neighborhood. Mount Vernon School will limit to 20 the number of nights that both lights and sound can be used, and only 10 of those can be Friday nights. Limit to 60 the total number of nights the lights can be used. That's about one night a week. As I have read in countless emails, it is not every night of the week. They will exclude the lights from any third-party rental agreements and forego the installation of either lights or sounds on the new sports fields. Mount Vernon Woods is situated less than a mile from the center of Sandy Springs, from where we are right now, the 7th largest city in Georgia, and the heart of the 6th largest metro area in the United States, which means embracing the dynamic energy and occasional noise that comes with living in such a vibrant community. But what better noise and energy could there be than the kind that comes from high school sports? The cheers of families, the camaraderie of teammates, the joy of competition. This isn't noise. This is a sound of growth, opportunity, and a community coming together. Our top priority should always be moving Sandy Springs forward, and we do that by attracting young families with high-quality schools in great neighborhoods and resources like play fields for our young athletes. Mount Vernon School is already doing this, and it deserves our support. That is why I'm voting yes to approve the amended conditional use permit, and I ask you all to do the same.
Any other comment? All right. Hang on a second. Whoop. I was waiting for Dr. Kelly. She made the second. All right. All right. Mr. DiGiulio.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As most of you who know me know, I've been involved with the city of Sandy Springs since 1987 when I met Eva. Also, those of you who know me know that three things I normally vote in favor of, and that's children, schools, and churches. One of the overriding concerns we had when I started working with Eva in 1987 and through the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s was the protected neighborhoods. I used to say we don't have protected neighborhoods in Sandy Springs. Sandy Springs is a protected neighborhood. And I don't think we really have to talk about protected neighborhoods here as we have to talk about protecting our neighborhoods. One of the things, in my opinion, that separates Sandy Springs from so many other places, I mean, let's face it, we could all have many, many places we could have lived, but we chose to live in Sandy Springs, and I've been here since 1981, I guess it was. But we chose to live in Sandy Springs because of the atmosphere of Sandy Springs, the city of Sandy Springs, the vibrancy of Sandy Springs, the camaraderie of Sandy Springs, and all of this is really, as I say, part of the protected neighborhoods we have here. And I feel that we, as a council up here, have an obligation to all of you up there, all of these kids that are at this school, along with the other schools, etc., to keep this protection going and keep this city going and to keep this city continuing to be the best place to live. Somebody said that, I think it was Christy said this was the fourth best place for young millennials to come, etc. We wanted to keep it that way. But in order to keep it that way, we have to protect what is our value. And our value in Sandy Springs has been the protection of our neighborhoods. We have not allowed, or we have tried to limit and tried to prevent as much creep into our neighborhoods as possible. I said on the phone the other day, and I don't remember if it was Chip or if it was Councilman John Paulson, how do you eat an elephant? And we all know that joke for those kids up there who don't know this joke. How do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. What we have here is attempting the second bite. There's been a plan made. There's been an agreement made. The agreement was made the original agreement was made in 2003 or 2004, and it didn't allow anything. Now we're looking for the first bite. So next year, the way our city runs, you can come back for a CUP every year. Next year, the following year, going to come back and say, well, 10 nights is really not enough. We need 15 nights because we have a chance then to do this. And we need this and we need another thing. We're going to have to do this other thing here. You know, and Chip says how the agreement was made not to include lights on the new fields. That was a deed restriction by the owner of the property. You would not have gotten that property if that restriction wasn't in there. That was his decision when he made. He didn't say, you didn't come to him and say, Mr. Glenn, if you'll go ahead and give us this land, we'll put this deed restriction in. That was his condition upon his making that gift. And we have to protect this neighborhood. We have to protect this city. And as I say, I normally vote for kids, schools, and churches. In this case, I have to vote against this. I have to protect what is valuable to Sandy Springs, the neighborhoods, the protection of the neighborhoods, the protection of the residents. And so for that reason, I'm just going to have to encourage my fellow council members that we need to deny this. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Paulson, am I next? Thank you. So, first things first, thank you all for coming to a council meeting. We normally don't get this participation from our citizens, especially our young citizens. And I hope that regardless of the outcome of tonight, the young folks in this audience come back to City Council, get engaged in your community, get engaged in the activities of both the city as well as your neighbors. So, and I also appreciate everybody being civil tonight. And the emails I've gotten have been factual, have been straightforward, or at least mostly factual. Maybe some are not quite as factual as you would like. But they've all been, again, civil. Nobody's calling anybody names. This is simply a situation where we have two opposing requests. The school wants to enhance their campus with evening games using lights and sound system with some restrictions. The neighbors want to continue to enjoy the peace and quiet they currently have. It's interesting that the neighbors and the school have managed to coexist, as Councilman DeGiulio said, for some 20-odd years. But there's always been an underlying theme in the community, which is we will grant you, we'll negotiate with you, but no lights, no night games. And that has been, based on everything I'm hearing, that's been consistent throughout this 20-plus year life. And I'm not going to go through the chronology, 2003. I did read part of the original agreement in 2003, and if a member of the Glenn family was still living in the neighborhood, this agreement with the neighbors would have renewed another 20 years automatically. That's how I read it, which is pretty interesting. So here we are discussing permission of light fields, which the neighborhoods are opposed to. There's also a distinction that I think is worth talking about. This is a protected neighborhood. It's a singular concept that ran through actually the formation of the city. One of the frustrations, I've been here since 1986, one of the frustrations of the neighborhoods has been, back before we were a city, Fulton County was going to impose, whether it's an apartment complex or an office building or something, and the neighbors would get on their red or sometimes blue shirts with a big circle and a slash through it. We'd all go down to Fulton County, and there'd be 200 people complaining, including Eva in many occasions, opposing this. Nobody ever paid any attention to us. So when the city had a chance to be formed, one of the premises was we as a community control what happens with the zoning and the uses in our community. That's why the city was formed. That's why 90-some% of the people that voted for it voted in favor of it. So we're a community that has protected neighborhoods. We've spent time talking about this. One of the questions I have is, who's responsible for protecting these neighborhoods? Obviously, the answer is this council up here, which brings us to tonight. It is true that if this application is denied, or actually if it's approved, the applicant can still come back in a year. That's one of the issues. And that's their right. Okay, they're property owners. That is their right. And someday in the future, the school may be granted the ability to light their fields. In my opinion, just not today.
Ms. Mueller.
So first I want to say both parties have done an exhaustive and an exhausting effort. Okay, so everyone should be applauded and feel good about that. This really came down to 3 points for me. The first one had to do with protected neighborhoods. The second was the intent for the field lighting. And the third was, I'm going to call this relations between neighbors. So I'm going to go through this in ascending order. So the third is relations between neighbors. Whatever the decision we make tonight, the school still resides in the neighborhood. The reason why you're there, as we heard, is because of the easement from the neighbors. And I think that over time, the neighbors have had concerns, whether maybe you haven't heard them, they haven't voiced, really haven't worked very well together. So whatever happens tonight, I would encourage the school and the neighborhood to work together to try to, become good neighbors with each other. So that's neither here nor there, really, and the decision point, but I wanted to put that out there. The second has to do with the intent of the lighting. That was the big question in my mind. And when I read the sequence of the property acquisitions and the associated conditions, that there would be no lights, especially on the ones that are on the 10 acres. It is a fact that the private agreement is expiring, and that if a member of the Glenn family were there, I don't believe that the lights would be able to be there. So that's null and void. The school's perfectly within their property rights, regardless of who thought what was said, to come forward. I do believe at a point in time that the school was genuine in the fact that they didn't want lights. The 10 acres is codified to not have lights. The 2017 use permit continued the no lights in the neighborhood. It's my belief, based on that the intent was to not have lights. However, now there's a desire to have lights. And to get the lights, I think there needs to be a workable solution with the neighbors. Today, that bridge, going back to my first thing, there's no bridge there. You can't cross it. So I think that bridge, if it were built, could be different. I'm not really sure. The third point has to do with protected neighborhoods. So there are two guiding documents. So this makes a little education session for some of our students. We have a document called the Comprehensive Plan that was adopted in 2017, as was our development code. Well, it's online, but this is old school for dinosaurs like me that still read the paper versions. And that was updated in 2023. So these are two things. So this talks about, this document is so important. As you heard Mr. Paulson and Mr. DiGiulio, the city of Sandy Springs was really founded because we wanted to get out of Fulton County and have control of our land uses. We didn't want encroachments on our neighborhoods. So if you look at the goals and you open this up, and I'll just do this real quick, is that if you go and you look at the very first goal for Sandy Springs is neighborhood preservation. It talks about a lot of other things, but neighborhood preservation was number one. And if you go to number 10 talks about how are you going to manage the implementation of the policies and these goals and the actions. And that's what you do. That's the development code. So think of this as your check the box. Your lights are going to be able to be so bright. You have to have a structure so many feet from a property line, et cetera. That's what the development code is. This is the how. This is the what and the why. And I could go through here and read section by section. I have things highlighted, but I'm not going to do that because it's pretty clear to me. I think that there's some things that were missed in the analysis that was done. I think the focus was on, did we check the box? Did we meet everything? So from that perspective, yes. So we're talking about the land use of a school. So yes, a school is a civic use, also defined as institutional by the plan. It is allowed in a protected neighborhood. That is absolutely a true statement. However, this conditional use permit isn't based upon whether or not we have a school afterwards or not. So the use remains the same afterwards. What we're talking about is the change to a physical attribute on the property, and how does that impact the neighborhoods? So a school is still going to be a school regardless if this goes forward. This is about the change to an attribute on the property. So I believe that was not part of the analysis that I think should have been done. Something else is that, so the question is, should lights really be allowed? And I think that when you think about Sandy Springs and how we protect our neighborhoods, this will be disruptive. I went to the same demonstration that Councilwoman Rochelle went to up in Gainesville. And yes, while you're on the field, the lights on the field, when you're out, it seems interesting, but I drove down the road and there was an office building. And I pulled over and I took pictures. And you could still see that. So if you are there and you're sitting in your backyard, you're still going to see lights. It's going to be lit up. Today, it's not lit up. The other thing is the sound. So we've talked a lot about the lights, but what about the sound? You can't get away from that. You can't go inside your house. You can't, you go in your house, but what do? Turn up the music on whatever device you have. So I think that the neighborhoods, they work with the school. You have the activities during the day, but they know there's a time when that stops, and then it's back to them. So for that reason, the comp plan, and this is what we were built on, I have to say I can't support this.
Dr. Kelly.
Yep. Mayor Paul, this is sort of a procedural question. If I wanted to request a roll call vote, would that?
There will be a roll call vote. I mean, if it's a voice vote and the chair is in doubt, there will be a hand count.
Okay. All right. Thanks. I have a few questions for staff, actually. I wanted to talk about the way enforcement from our end would work, as it relates specifically to the conditions you presented, not necessarily the couple that were added on. Could you walk us through that a little bit?
So are we talking about if the lights are on too long or on a night that they shouldn't be on?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, if you could just go through those scenarios related to the conditions.
Typically what would happen is somebody would make a complaint. We would then probably contact the school. Code enforcement would contact the school and say, try to conduct an investigation. If we needed to and we were able to, if they said, they always have the lights on Thursday night and they're not supposed to, we can schedule an officer to go out there at that time to see whether or not the lights are on. If they are, the first step is to issue a notice of violation. If they continue beyond the notice of violation to do it another time, we have the ability to issue a citation. A citation means they have to go to court and address the solicitor or the judge, and a maximum fine for each event is $1,000. So for every night, we could keep going out there every night if that's what they continue to do. Ultimately, I think this is perhaps a question for the city attorney. We may be able to revoke the ability for them to have the lights. I'm not sure.
Mr. Lee?
That's sort of a question.
It's real uncertain. At the end of the day, it's a matter of zoning, and it's not listed as one of our penalties. It would probably take court action in order to change it, or change a vote of the council to take it away.
Dan, could we ask for injunctive relief?
Yeah.
Could you explain what that might mean beyond just our because someone might say that $1,000 a day is a cost of business, and we're talking about a fairly extreme situation. Could the city, because I also am very interested in enforceability and have some questions when it's my turn, but would an option be available to the city so that now we're not the one saying it, but a court is saying it, and somebody's going to go to jail if they're violating an injunction?
We have done that in the past. We did it with the, not to draw a comparison to this wonderful school to strip clubs, but we did it with the strip clubs.
I see a lot of students laughing.
I know. But seriously, we only have a $1,000 fine. We have sought injunctive relief to enforce. We've done it with party houses to get a more severe punishment. But in essence, the vote tonight, you're changing an ordinance. It's a legislative action. So in order to undo it, you'd have to do the same thing permanently, is to have another vote to change the zoning, and that would be the reason for it, the change in impact and the violation of the conditions that have been presented.
So a council could change the CUP in a way that reduces the conditions? Just
Yes.
like the, okay, interesting.
Can you talk about sound in that same way?
Sure. We have noise meters with, I think, both police and with code enforcement. So if somebody is calling us at night, they generally contact the police, and they will typically go out and measure at the property line to see whether or not they're in violation of what the condition of zoning says. I think they're agreeing to 65 decibels. So they would go to the property line and actually test it right then and there and see whether or not. And then we would ask them to turn down, if it's possible, the sound. So if they're projecting sound, we could ask them to turn it down.
Okay. All right, those are my questions for now. I don't really want to do like a long speech or anything. I'm actually still listening to my colleagues. I'm still wrapping my head around this. Although I will say that this would have been a lot easier if we were sticking to sort of the trend of having the neighborhood and the school work together. And I completely understand. I don't think any promises were broken. I don't subscribe to any of that. But there's value in that for me. Like that matters. I will offer you that. It does matter to me that you all have been, you have a rich history of working together. And almost the existence and the growth of the school has essentially been predicated upon that relationship. So it's just unfortunate to see that break down.
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Baumann.
That's all I'll say for now.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. Mr. Collins, if you would come up. So we've gone through a process for a year that starts with the code limitations, which are like way up here, right? Like every night, 10:30, 11, sound levels, all sorts of things, rentals, all those things. Somewhere during the process, there was a new set of conditions that was Monday to Friday. And then over the weekend, or leading up into the weekend, I think we received an email of some conditions. I think we received an email on Saturday and then a new set on Sunday. Can you walk us through the school's thinking on the getting to the conditions, where we're at? And there is a little bit of a discrepancy, but just tell us, what your thinking is. You're skinning it down. Can you tell us a little bit more, and then how you arrive at 60 days?
Sure. There was a request made to come up with the absolute bare minimum that the school could justify the significant investment in these lights. And so we went back to the school. Again, like I said, the school has been willing to consider anything. So we went back, and to answer that question, we answered the question, the absolute minimum that we would need would be 36 nights over the course of the year, 10% of the year. But then another of you asked a question. The question was, would that be enough to allow the addition of the 2 new girls' teams that everybody wants? It's very important. And so we went back, and to answer that question, we were told that it would take 60 days, and that's how we arrived at 60. And every other condition was in response to some concern that somebody raised. And if anybody can think of a new condition that solves the problems, we will absolutely consider it.
So, and one of the conditions is this liaison committee. And there was a question that I had in mind. I was not the one who asked the question necessarily about rebuilding trust, but I do want to ask about rebuilding trust from the schools. And maybe Christy could do this, or you can do it together. about how would the school, if this is approved, go about rebuilding trust. And I do intend to ask for that condition to be put back in here in a moment, but let's get through the question. How would the school like to approach the dealing with the aftermath of this process and the polarization if it's approved, and even if it's not approved, but if it's approved, rebuilding sort of its relationship with the neighborhoods and rebuilding trust, and how do you all envision that particular condition, if you want to address that?
May I invite the head of school back up to address that question? I don't want to put words in her mouth. Ms. Lindstrom? May I? To answer the question?
Yes. Please do.
Thank you for the question, and it's essential in this conversation. And we talk about building trust a lot at Mount Vernon. I think you do it in a couple of ways. You do it with consistency, you do it with commitment, and you do it with collaboration. You have to be trustworthy, and you have to be trustful. And those two things are built over time, and you build like a bank of trust. And it is my commitment to work with this neighborhood. I'm new to this role, but I have already been engaging in conversations, and we want different things. But I believe we can have productive conversation, and I will continue to do that. I shepherd a lot of young people, and I teach them that they have to work with the people around them to have a great impact. And trust is a huge part of that. So what you have from me is my commitment for consistent, responsive, and open collaboration.
Thank you. I heard, so I was the one who asked the question during the process, not recently, but a while back. I'm a lawyer and a businessman, and do a lot of negotiation in my other life. And I understand the idea of sharpening a pencil in a deal. And so I, in fact, did ask you the question, what is the least amount that could justify the investment? And thank you for acknowledging the 36 days. I just asked you the question. I didn't suggest a number. That was the number you come back. I'd like to, I actually now favors 60 versus 36 I didn't know what the number was. And I do have to trust that you, I mean, I could tell you to articulate, you guys allocate between the boys and girls. I think no matter what number of days you got, you need to allocate between the boys and the girls. I mean, I completely, well, yeah, I also think everything else requires that too. I mean, that's the girls' sports and boys' sports, all really important. Let me just ask you, and I'm not proposing a motion, if it came down to 36 versus 60, you'd still accept that, right?
I believe the answer is yes.
Okay, I want to ask Mr. Westmoreland. I mean, we're right here. Mr. Westmoreland, would the school, would 30, I'm not trying to put you on the spot, but I want to kind of cut to the rub of it.
Right.
Would the neighborhood accept 36 days? I mean, I've heard it said they wouldn't accept one, and if you wouldn't accept one, you won't accept 30. I just want to ask here tonight, can we reach a consensus? Is there a chance we need to send you out into the hallway to discuss this?
Well, I think as you said in your questions of staff before we even started the public hearing, I believe the word that you used, that it was the binary decision. And I think that still is a good description of where we are. The neighborhood's position is that, and I appreciate the fact that now Mr. Collins has quantified how many nights they'd have to pay for the investment in lights, but our position is...
Well, I think the question was
I think you're
justified.
asking me if there are any number of nights with lights that the neighborhood would accept. The answer is no.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to, I still have a statement that I'm going to conclude with. Procedurally, help me. I would like to substitute for Councilwoman Reichel's motion exactly the conditions that Mr. Collins read into the record, because they included, some of them were the same. It was still 10 Friday nights, maximum of 60 days total. Practice, no amplified sound ever. No amplified sound except for competitions. And then I heard something about neighborhood liaison committee that goes to the trust, and post a staff member on site, and posting these conditions on their website on the school. I think I've summarized that. The record reflects what those are. So procedurally, how would I go about suggesting that substitute motion Mr. Mayor?
You would be making an amendment to the main motion, and you would substitute the language that you just said for Ms. Rochelle's conditions.
So that is I would like to amend the motion for approval, substituting what I just said, but...
Well, how about articulating this?
I will articulate it, and I will ask Mr. Collins to say if I've missed something. There would be a maximum of 60 days total for the year, that 10 of those days would be Fridays, that there would be no practice, there would be no amplified sound ever during practice, that no amplified sound except for competition. I think that's the same thing. I'm missing it. Neighborhood Liaison Committee.
I'm not sure we can legislate that part.
That the school would establish
I'm not sure we can add that to a condition. It would be something that we would request, but I'm not sure we can enforce it.
Many times, these things are not enforceable, and that would be one of them. And at the end of the day, if there are 10 conditions, do you seek to revoke it because one of them is not followed?
Right.
It becomes an enforcement debate, is what it
Well, I'm going to ask them to stand up. If we don't add it as a condition...
Let me do this. Let you go ahead and finish your conditions.
Okay. Well, you don't mind.
You're making an amendment. We can't have an intermission in that process.
Okay. And a staff member on site for these nighttime events, posting the agreed conditions on their website and on site. That's my motion.
Okay. Is there a second? No, he is substituting these for your conditions.
Is there something that I missed? I would include, thank you.
So no amplified sound during practice.
And then no on which ones, Jody? I'm sorry.
Foregoing lights and sound on the new sports fields to be constructed north of the Ron Hill Field.
I would agree to that, yes.
Excuse me, Mayor.
Yes.
Just for clarity, the way I understood Councilperson Rochelle's motion was she was moving to adopt the staff's recommendations.
That's correct.
Is this amendment doing away with those recommendations?
Absolutely not. It is to adopt the staff recommendations with these additional qualifications that were brought forward by Mr. Collins and by Councilwoman Rochelle.
Can I just add on to my
Hold on just a
conditions?
second. I'll recognize you shortly. Once Mr. Bauman, we're clear on what he's amending.
What are you adding to her addition to the staff's recommendation? I think that might be the way to go about it.
Well, let me read what I have as the amendment so far. That Mr. Bauman would strike the non-staff conditions outlined by Councilmember Rochelle and substitute the following. A maximum of 60 days annually, limits to 10 Friday nights per year, no amplified sound during practice, a staff member must be on site for all events, that the conditions would be posted on the website and at the field, and there would be foregoing lights and sound on the new fields to be developed. Is that correct? Have I summarized?
If I may get a quick sidebar with Councilman Rochelle, does that include what you wanted?
Yeah.
That is correct, but also leaving in place what staff had brought forward.
Okay. All right. We have an amendment. Is there a second?
Second.
This is now not, I still need to speak to the overall thing.
I understand. All right. This would be a better process. If you're going to second it.
What if she just accepts it?
If you just accept
I
those.
accept it.
Dr. Kelly, would you accept those?
accept.
All right. So now we don't have to do the amendment without objection would be considered, and the previous motion to that those three conditions cited by Councilmember Rochelle would be stricken, and these would be substituted in place. That's where we are right now.
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Bauman.
Excuse me. I apologize for this one point of clarity. It's not enforceable to have a condition of zoning in this cup that applies to another piece of property. And as has been mentioned before, and as the city's ordinance reflects, the other fields already have a cup that prohibit lights on them.
Okay. All right. That's so we'd have to strike that part. It's already covered by the deed restriction. Is that correct? All right. So we can, Mr. Baumann, you understand that and accept it?
I do.
Okay.
And our intent, though, being pretty clear on the record.
Yeah.
All right. Yes, Mr. Collins. I would like to ask Mr. Collins. Mr. Collins, do you have something to tell us?
May I invite my co-counsel, Mr. Edwards?
And by the way, I appreciate everybody's patience here, trying to get this complicated issue.
Yeah, sure. So just to speak to the history of the property, there's a special use permit for the 10 acres back in the Ashton Woods rezoning in 2015. After that was done, the school acquired those 10 acres, consolidated it with the original 30 acres of the property. So now it's one 40-acre parcel.
That's the 2017 Cup.
The 2017.
That says no recreational field lighting and no tennis court lighting also.
After the consolidation, then the 2017 use permit was approved.
Okay. I'm going to allow Mr. Westmoreland. Is there anything, I would like to ask you, I understand the opposition, but knowing where I'm going with this, is there anything you need to add in terms of because I don't want to inadvertently leave out a restriction that currently exists. I don't want to inadvertently leave it out.
Well, I think it's correct, as Mr. Edwards said, that as I said, that in 2017, the school consolidated the 10 acres that we had in the original Ashton Woods application with the 30 that they already own, all of which are now covered by the conditions in the 2017 Cup. So if those are carried forward, I don't believe that you're missing anything, if that is your question.
It is. Thanks. So I just have a little statement also. And I appreciate everybody listening to our statements. I know that we have up here, all of us probably spent tens, if not 100 hours listening to emails and meetings and calls and texts and public comments. So thank you for your indulgence here. This has been an emotional and divisive issue, and I respect the passion so many of you have brought to this discussion. I've worked hard to listen to all sides, attending lighting demonstrations, reading up on light and noise abatement technologies, reviewing our comprehensive plan and development code, and holding numerous meetings with school leaders, neighbors, and residents. And nobody has been shy in emailing us either. I think at last count it's probably close to 400. These conversations have been invaluable in shaping my perspective. To the neighbors who are here and maybe watching online, thank you for sharing your time and concerns with me, especially those of you who welcomed me into your home. I know this is deeply personal for you, and I want you to know that your voices have been heard and valued, and I've given great weight to that as I've considered this request. I also share your commitment to protecting neighborhood character. It's what makes Sandy Springs special. I also understand the belief by some that there were promises of no lights, not ever. And while I have considered that expectation, I've seen no binding agreements to make such a prohibition permanent. In fact, the evidence is to the contrary, that when they went to the trouble of creating an agreement, it, by its own terms, established a 20-year or life of the declarant, as I understand it, and that time period is now currently passing. So there was an expressed intent that this no lights, not ever would be no lights, not ever for 20 years. Without the 2017 CUP restriction, it's undisputable that our development code would allow lights with far more permissive conditions than what's being proposed, and I would point to the Weber School. The challenge here is balancing the value of a protected neighborhood with the needs of vital community institution. Our comprehensive plan and zoning and development codes explicitly state that schools and their ancillary uses like lighted fields are in fact compatible with protected neighborhoods. These principles are not mutually exclusive, and thoughtful leadership requires finding balance. It's also important to recognize that the school has property rights and the absolute right to make this request. While the neighbor's input is valuable and must be considered, and I am considering it, it does not equate to a veto power. For me, it's not enough to say, wait until the neighbors approve this. This council has the responsibility to weigh competing interests and make a decision that is fair, thoughtful, and aligned with the broader needs of our community. Whatever we decide, I do know many of you will be disappointed. And that's why we get the big bucks. Youth sports like band, theater, and debate offer lifelong benefits. They teach teamwork, discipline, and resilience while fostering connection and community. That is absolutely intrinsic to the mission of a school. Strong educational institutions, both public and independent, are critical to attracting and retaining families, enhancing property values, and driving economic development in Sandy Springs. This is about more than Mount Vernon. It's about ensuring that Sandy Springs remains a highly desirable place where families want to live, work, and thrive for generations to come. We've fought hard for a new North Springs High School, and again, the threatened closure of Spalding Drive Elementary because we recognize the pivotal role education plays in our city's future. Great schools, combined with diverse range of housing options, are essential for sustainable economic growth. Right, Mr. Burnett? You don't have to answer. Supporting a strong workforce and ensuring the success of our local businesses, shops, and restaurants. This proposal reflects that same commitment to fostering education and creating opportunities for our youth, families, and our community. I just have a philosophical difference. I mean, I think that I heard the words atmosphere, vibrancy, and camaraderie. That's exactly what this proposal brings. I recognize that saying no can feel like the safer choice. Change is hard, and fear of the unknown is real. But often the worry is greater than the reality. This very City Springs development, the Atlanta Braves Stadium and the Battery are great examples of projects once met with skepticism and doomsayers that are now cheered and celebrated as great assets of the community. Change is inevitable, and as leaders we cannot be bystanders and sit idly by. Our role is to shape the change we desire and need thoughtfully and responsibly. If we deny this proposal, it does not end here. The school has every right to come back with another request, and we will likely find ourselves revisiting the issue in the near future. Let me be very clear. If I thought a compromise or consensus outcome were possible, and you know I tried and I tried and I tried, I would absolutely support holding off for that. And if you told me right now that you were going to go back and work it out, I'd say go do that. And others have tried as well up here. And it has become clear that such an outcome is just not achievable at this time. But that does not justify saying no. What we are doing is balancing and minimizing. This proposal for lighted fields is significantly below what the code allows and far less than what the school originally requested and requested again, which is a positive step. Approving this proposal acknowledges the school's property rights while striving to respect neighborhood character by minimizing impacts and balancing the broader needs of our community. And I don't know where it's not in here, but I also carry with great weight the staff recommendation. I think they put a lot of effort into this. And I do acknowledge the Planning Commission's no vote. I do take that into consideration. I was a little disappointed that it came with no debate or discussion other than a promise broken. I know this decision won't satisfy everyone. I told some of you, actually on both sides, that when you thanked me for listening and hearing, you may not like me so much after I vote. But I believe this represents a reasonable balance. My hope is that whatever the outcome tonight, our city can come together to focus on the things that unite us. Let's rebuild the trust, let's foster collaboration, and let's ensure a brighter future for everyone in Sandy Springs.
Well, let me close this discussion and then we'll get around to voting here. I've told folks that when you make changes of this magnitude, you really need a consensus on council. And I have no idea how this vote's going to turn out. I think it's going to be close. But I've told both sides that in case of a tie, the motion fails. Now, as has been pointed out, the school's got an opportunity to come back within a year. The agreement goes to September, which covers most of that year. And I hope the school will come back, because I'm going to ask the neighborhood, you need to be a little bit flexible. Don't be adamant. Work this out. This is our kids. These are our kids that are sitting up there, and I'm with Mr. DiGiulio. Push comes to shove, I'm with the kids. So if it's a tie, it fails. But I hope that you'll use that year effectively. School, you got work to do. You've destroyed the trust of your neighbors because of, they don't believe that you're going to live up to the agreements. You should have worked on this before you brought this to us and built the relationships that you need to get everybody. You're not going to get everybody, but you could have done a better job of building relationships with your neighbors. I attend Holy Innocents. They'll be next. And I've told them, I said, you guys got a problem. You're a church, you're a Christian organization, and your neighbors hate you because you disrupt their lives 7 days a week. And you have to understand that in a neighborhood, there are constraints. When you decided to locate the school in a residential area, that comes with limitations. You can't do everything that other schools might be able to do that have buffers. Mr. Collins talked about Riverwood. I live less than a quarter mile from Riverwood, but we don't have any control over the public schools. But also, they have the ability to do what they want to do. And trust me, neighborhood, other than the first night I bought my house when they had a fireworks display going on, and I thought I moved away from a neighborhood where pistols were being used to a neighborhood where artillery was being used. Otherwise, it's been not a problem. Not a problem. So I'm with Dr. Kelly and the rest. If this motion fails, it's likely to fail only temporarily.
Mayor Paul, can you explain why it would fail if it's a 3-3?
Tie votes fail.
What you don't?
I can vote. Yes, Mr. Baumann.
Actually, Councilman Reichel, do you have a
So
follow-up question?
you're gonna choose not to vote?
No, I didn't say that. I said it would fail.
So that means you would vote against it.
That's pretty much what I've told everybody. If it's a tie vote, it fails.
It fails because you choose to vote against it.
I don't know how much clearer I can be.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Point of inquiry.
Yeah.
The chair on a 3-3 has the option of voting yes or voting no.
That is correct.
Okay, thank you. That's just simple words.
Right. So I would be basically leaving the status quo in place, would be how I would vote, hoping that you'll use, the agreement doesn't end until September, so that gives you 8 months plus to go ahead and get something worked out. But we can't have any demonstrations, folks. Please put the lights away. So I'm hoping that this will be an opportunity, but neighborhood, don't assume that this vote tonight, if it does fail, is the end of it. We need to build some flexibility into this and be neighbors to the other side too. All right, with that, I'll call the question. The question is on agenda item 2025-016. Mount Vernon School, 510 Mount Vernon Highway, request for conditional use permit to amend the conditions of use permit U17001 to allow illumination of the existing athletic field. With the staff conditions and the amended conditions of a maximum of 60 days annually, 10 Friday nights annually, no amplified sound during practice, staff member on site, and I can't read my. Oh, that the posting of the agreed conditions on the city website, on the school website, and on the field. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no.
No.
All right, we'll have to show of hands. All in favor of the motion, say aye. Or raise your hand. All opposed. All right, the motion fails. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item number 2025-017. This is consideration of a resolution to reappoint members to the Sandy Springs Board of Appeals, Sherry Allen and Nathan Cuntham. This is presented by Mayor Rusty Paul.
It's been a request that we wait till everything clears and then we'll continue. No. Eden. Some of these folks out. Is there any way we can just open the gates? All right. Thank you. All right, I think we're ready to proceed.
Agenda item number 2025-017. This is consideration of a resolution to reappoint members to the Sandy Springs Board of Appeals, Sherry Allen and Nathan Cuntham, presented by Mayor Rusty Paul.
As I told you at the last meeting, we've got some appointments that need to be made. Sherry Allen and Nathan Cuntham have both in their first term. Some of you may be aware that Sherry Allen has also been appointed by the Fulton County Commission to oversee the Fulton voter registration and voter operations. And I called her because I was a little concerned about being able to do double duty. And she assured me that she had the time to be able to do both. At the voter registration and voter operations were, they did take some time, but the Board of Appeals was her true passion. So I'm asking you to reappoint both of these individuals to the Sandy Springs Board of Appeals.
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
I move approval of agenda item 2025-17, resolution to reappoint members of the Sandy Springs Board of Appeals, Ms. Sherry Allen and Mr. Nathan Congborn.
We have a motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Been motion by Mr. Paulson, seconded by Mr. DiGiulio, that we approve Sherry Allen and Nathan Contham with to the Sandy Springs Board of Appeals. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on the resolution reappointing members of the Board of Appeals. All in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. Clerk, please read the next item.
Agenda item number 2025-018. This is consideration of a resolution authorizing the adoption of the bylaws of the North Fulton Emergency Medical Response Oversight Committee, that's MROC, and to authorize the city manager to execute the agreement. This is presented by Fire Chief Keith Sanders.
Chief Sanders.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Before you is a resolution requesting this adoption of the MROC group. We're a committee that meets with the other 4 cities after you approve the contract with AMR. It's an oversight committee that reviews the performance, the contractual agreement, and makes sure that AMR stays in compliance with that. And if you have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them for you.
All right, you've heard the report of the Fire Chief. What's the desire of council?
Mayor.
Mr. DiGiulio. We have a motion by Mr. DiGiulio. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Motion by Mr. DiGiulio, seconded by Dr. Kelly, that we approve agenda item 2025-018, a resolution authorizing the adoption of the bylaws of North Fulton Emergency Medical Response Oversight Committee and authorizing city manager to execute the agreement. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2025-018, a resolution adopting the bylaws of the North Fulton Emergency Medical Response Oversight Committee. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item number 2025-019, consideration of a resolution to declare as surplus certain property owned by the city and directing disposal of the same, presented by Chief Financial Officer Tony Carlisle.
Ms. Carlisle.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. This request is seeking your approval to declare certain city property as surplus. The attachments in the packet provide a list of all equipment for consideration of categorizing as surplus by the Fleet, Police, and Community Development Departments. The purchasing policy and code of ordinance directs our purchasing team to dispose of these items under the supervision of the city manager in the most advantageous manner. We're seeking approval of classifying these items as surplus.
All right, you've heard the report of the Chief Financial Officer. What's the desire of council? Dr. Kelly.
Move approval
All
of
right.
agenda item 2025-019, a resolution to declare as surplus certain property owned by the city and directing disposal of the same.
We have a motion by Dr. Kelly. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion by Dr. Kelly, seconded by Ms. Mueller, that we approve agenda item 2025-019, a resolution declaring a surplus certain property owned by the city and directing disposal of the same. Any discussion? Mr. DiGiulio.
Tony, what kind of equipment are we talking about here?
So for police, we have a few cars that are going to be sold by ATO, as well as some equipment that's out of use, taser holders. Let's see if I can get to the list real quick. Emergency lights, a head mount model, a head mount, tough book, taser, 7 holster, just various equipment that's no longer in use, is expired. Exactly. There are a few cars, but those are going to be sold by ATO as has been done in the past. Just a few miscellaneous office equipment from community development, but mostly miscellaneous and aged equipment.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question is on agenda item 2025-019, the resolution declaring a surplus certain property owned by the city and directing disposal of the same. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item number 2025-020. This is consideration to authorize the city staff to submit a Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, or RAISE grant program application to the United States Department of Transportation for the 2025 program, to authorize the required local funding match, and to authorize the city manager to execute the application documents. This is presented by Public Works Director Marty Martin.
Mr. Martin.
Mayor and Council, good evening. Tonight, I bring before you a recommendation that the city apply for a United States Department of Transportation grant in the amount of $9,120,000 in funding from the 2025 Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity, RAISE discretionary grant program for construction and utility work associated with the Roswell Road North End Boulevard project, S2105. The RAISE grant program provides grants for service transportation infrastructure projects with significant local or regional impact. The program has previously been known as both the BUILD program and Tiger grant in previous iterations and various administrations. This current RAISE grant program was established in conjunction with the bipartisan infrastructure law bill in November 2021. The city has previously applied for BUILD or RAISE grants in past. Our first application was for the Georgia 400 bridge enhancements in 2020, and since then we've applied for the PATH 400 and a couple of other years, 21, 23, and 24, but no grant has been awarded to date. Under the 2025 advice provided in the notice of funding opportunity, the city can pursue funding for capital projects with an award range, in this case, of $5 million to $25 million, which this project estimate of $9 million fits comfortably within. Applications are due on January the 30th, 2025 for this grant. Many of you, I think, are familiar with the Roswell Road North End Boulevard project, originally envisioned in the Next 10 Roswell Road small area plan in 2017, and further studied as concept study and scoping study with the Georgia Department of Transportation in the interest of soliciting GDOT support for the project. To that end, the Atlanta Regional Commission Transportation Improvement Program identified the project as FN 352 with a GDOT project identifier number of 0019793, and the city was initially supported with a $960,000 federal grant from ARC for preliminary engineering work. Thus, preliminary engineering has begun at this point, and the environmental work that is associated with a federal grant project has well begun, which makes the project a stronger candidate for subsequent grant awards like the RAISE grant in this particular case. Staff has reviewed the criteria under the RAISE grant notice NOFO and has identified the Roswell Road North End Boulevard as is very likely the best candidate the city has to offer at this point. The criteria for this particular year's grant program includes safety, environmental sustainability, quality of life, mobility and community connectivity, economic competitiveness and opportunity, state of good repair, partnership and collaboration, and in innovation. Additionally, the project's location in an area prime for economic revitalization, where many of the residents are low income, make the application competitive because the criteria also gives preference to investments in economically disadvantaged communities. The grant request will allow the city to complete the entire project through construction. With this summary, thus far, the city has, as I mentioned, received $960,000 for PE, preliminary engineering from ARC. Subsequently, we've also requested, without a decision announced yet from ARC, some $2.2 million in right-of-way support from ARC. This grant amount at $9,120,000 requires a local match of $2,280,000, a 20% match of the overall amount. The city has those dollars available in our T-SPLOST 2021 program allocated against this current project. With that, staff recommends that the city apply for this raised grant.
All right, you've heard the report of the Public Works Director. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul,
Dr. Kelly.
I want to move approval of agenda item 2025-020. Authorization of city staff to submit a Rebuilding American Infrastructure with Sustainability and Equity Grant Program application to the United States Department of Transportation for the 2025 program, to approve the required local funding match, and to authorize the city manager to execute the application documents.
A motion by Dr. Kelly. Is there a second? Motion by Dr. Kelly, seconded by Ms. Mueller, that we approve agenda item 2025-2020, submitting a raised grant program application to USDOT for the 2025 program. Any discussion? Dr. Kelly.
Quick question about the north. Best case scenario, we get the funding. What happens to the money that's in the T-SPLOST account, the money that the revenue for this project that we've gotten through T-SPLOST?
Right now, our estimates for total delivery of the project exceed the dollars available within T-SPLOST.
Right.
So first, we intend to use, should we be successful in all of these federal aid grant applications, first we'd use those dollars for the local match requirements with it. Then there may be as well the necessity to buy up any deficit that we might incur with the project along the way, as we experienced a couple of years ago with significant inflation growth, et cetera, with some of our projects. So first, buy up or buy and match with the T-SPLOST funds available.
Right.
Should we have excess funds to need, staff, as we have done before with mayor and council, would bring to you recommendations on where those T-SPLOST funds might be reallocated across the program based on other funding needs within the T-SPLOST program.
Okay, let me ask you this. Right now, if I recall correctly, we expect the line item for the North End Boulevard project is around $8,800,000 or somewhere around $9 million or so.
Yes, ma'am.
Right, and we estimate the project in total to be quite a bit more than that.
Right. We're looking in the teens at this point.
In the
overall
teens.
program. Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. And so much of that is dependent upon related development and the contributions from related development along this corridor. There's redevelopment opportunities here as well that can influence the overall cost that the project may have to carry as we look at adjacent developments there.
And there is an open house for that project coming up at some
Not
point?
scheduled yet. We have one forecasted in mid-spring as an open house in order to get public comment and input on the
So is
project.
that March, April?
Correct.
April?
Yes, Councilman.
All right, thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question is on agenda item 2025-020, submitting a raised grant application to USDOT for the 2025 program. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. The clerk will please read the next item.
Agenda item number 2025-021. This is consideration of a resolution to approve a contract award to White Oak Landscape Company for landscaping services for city recreation and parks, and to authorize the city manager to execute the contract. Presented by Director of Director of Recreation and Parks, Brent Walker.
Mr. Walker.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. The city received 13 proposals for a new parks landscape maintenance contract on December 9th. Vendors were asked to submit itemized pricing for park properties and former residential properties owned by the city. This will allow the city to select a vendor for each scope of service that is the most advantageous. Through the performance price trade-off procedures, the review team determined that White Oak's Landscape Company would provide the level of quality that is expected in our park facilities. White Oak Landscape received an acceptable rating for the capabilities and approaches, and a substantial rating and performance confidence based on their experience with similar government contracts and their work history with the Recreation and Parks Department. Also, based on industry knowledge, we felt that the price of $445,000 per year was within the expected competitive range for the level of services that were needed in the park system. The review team also determined that Triscapes LLC would be able to provide an acceptable level of service with substantial confidence for the residential lots maintenance. The value of that contract is $20,000 per year and would be submitted to the city manager for approval as the award amount falls within the city manager's signing threshold. With that, I open it up to any questions you may have.
All right, you've heard the report of the Director of Recreation and Parks. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
I move approval of agenda item 2025-021, resolution to approve a contract award to White Oak Landscape Company, Inc. for landscaping services for city recreation and parks, and authorize city manager to execute the contract.
A motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second?
Second.
By Mr. Baumann?
Yep.
Any discussion?
A quick one, Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
Who holds that contract now?
Rupert was the former vendor, but we elected not to continue with that contract.
And they didn't bid on it, huh?
No, sir.
Okay. All right.
Ms. Mueller.
So, Brent, question. So I'm glad they're gone. I think they're the ones that devastated Lost Corner, right? They went and sprayed or something and they weren't supposed to. So I guess in light of that, when we have a new contractor, what do we do to educate them on what to do, what's in scope, out of scope, and what's clearly out of bounds?
Sure. So this time around, we had a more robust scope of work during this proposal process than what was done in the past. We supplied maps, we supplied more direction for them to propose on. Also, fortunately, White Oak Landscape currently does service for us, and we have a history with them, and have a lot of confidence in their ability.
So we'll make sure that they know, like especially sensitive areas, that they're not mowing, spraying, et cetera.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Mr. Baumann.
Hey, is this going to be under the purview of, is the roundabout at Northside Drive under the purview of this contract? After the contractor, Marty, the question is, can we please get somebody on fixing up that roundabout landscaping on Northside Drive? You holler.
Yeah, so two parts to that question. One, we have a warranty period within the contract
Let's enforce it.
that we'll enforce, and then after that, we'll have a maintenance contract or post-warranty period to take care of.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on agenda item 2025-021, approving a contract award to White Oak Landscape Company for landscaping services. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. Moving to the next item.
Thank you, Mayor.
Agenda item number 2025-22. This is consideration of a resolution to approve the settlement and purchase of fee simple right-of-way and temporary construction easement for property rights and interests located at 295 Mount Vernon Highway, Sandy Springs, Fulton County, Georgia, and for other purposes as it relates to the Johnson's Ferry Road, Mount Vernon Highway intersection improvement project, presented by City Attorney Dan Lee.
Mr. Lee.
Mayor and Council, this is the next to the last piece of property on the Johnson Ferry Mount Vernon Highway project. This is a condemnation that you authorized back in June for the Fortune Foods, which is the Chevron right here at the corner of is that Boylston and Mount Vernon. If you'll remember, the project was moved from the Mount Vernon Towers over to that side as being the most inexpensive route to take, with less impact on less property. The appraisal for that property came in at $306,400. The appraisal of the property owner was $490,000. As you can see from what's going on now, there were many challenges, not to mention a kerosene tank had to be removed and put someplace else on the property, which required an EPD permit and some other things that are consequential costs to the project. The proposed settlement is $380,000, which staff believes is a very good price of settlement in this matter. It's $73,600 more than was paid into court. We'd recommend Mayor and Council approve the amount.
All right, you've heard the report of the city attorney. What's the desire of council?
Mayor Paul.
Ms. Mueller.
I move that we approve agenda item 2025-022, a resolution to approve the settlement and purchase of fee simple right-of-way and a temporary construction easement for property rights and interests located at 295 Mount Vernon Highway, Sandy Springs, Georgia, for other purposes as it relates to the Johnson Ferry Road, Mount Vernon Highway I can't talk tonight, intersection improvements project.
A motion by Mr. Mueller. Is there a second? Motion by Ms. Mueller, seconded by Mr. Paulson, that we approve agenda item 2025-022, settlement and purchase fee simple right-of-way and a temporary construction easement for property rights and interests located at 295 Mount Vernon Highway. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question is on agenda item 2025-022, approving the settlement and purchase of fee simple right-of-way and a temporary construction easement for property rights at 295 Mount Vernon Highway. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The item is approved. Moving to reports, I don't have anything much to report right now. So, anybody else? All right, Dr. Kelly.
I wanted to give a quick kudos to our event team. Looks like we had another successful MLK Day event. I will offer that I appreciate the fact that our event is a little bit of sort of a niche event in that it attracts young people. I find that it's one of few MLK Day events that appeal to kids. Now, with that said, I did make an effort to go to the City of Brookhaven's event yesterday, which was more of a formal, mature, you had a speaker, and Inspire Brands had an MLK event a few days ago at their headquarters, which was also great. So there's been a lot of great sort of MLK Day events. I'm thankful that ours is a little bit different, not the typical, speaker type events. Now, Thursday, there's going to be another interesting vote, which is why I'm glad our meeting wasn't moved to Thursday, because Fulton County Schools will be looking at Spalding Drive formally for the first time. Their first sort of formal vote around the school. And also this weekend, some of us are going to have our GMA training. It feels like it's been a while, so I'm excited about that. I think Melissa and we're going to be in the same class. Municipal law, Dan, watch out. Because when I learn this, yeah. Sorry. All right, thanks.
Yeah, we do have Cities United this weekend down at, it's moved from the Hilton to the Omni. And so it's always a real opportunity. I hope everybody will go down and participate. It's always a good event. There'll be a legislative breakfast Monday morning, early, 7:30, and then everybody's going to the Capitol to make a show of force to the legislature. Those who support us and those who don't will know we're there. You get a nice little scarf, too. Any others? All right. Ms. Carlisle, the financials.
Real quickly. We're done. All right, these are the numbers for November 2024 unaudited financials. We are at 41.67% of the budget year. Revenues are at 38.51%, and expenditures are at 37.82% of the budget. Since the last report, we've achieved 100% of our current year property taxes. The expenditures continue to trend as expected between 28 and 60% of the approved budget. This concludes the financial report for November 2024.
Any questions on the unaudited financials? All right, looking good. All right, we need an executive session for the purpose of litigation.
Mayor Paul.
Mr. Paulson.
I move that we suspend regular order and move into executive session for the purposes of litigation.
Have a motion by Mr. Paulson. Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. DiGiulio that we suspend regular order and go into executive session for the purpose of litigation. Any discussion? Hearing none, we'll call the question. The question's on the executive session. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. We are in executive session. I hope not. It's only as long as we make it.